What happened at your work which caused multiple people to all quit at once? I was bartending on the side to augment the crap pay I get as a helicopter flight instructor. Worked there for 2 years and I was never late, nor had any disciplinary trouble. Well, one day I had a cross-country flight run longer than it should have because I had some maintenance issues. I knew I would be late, so I called and talked to my supervisor to give him a heads up. By the time I made it to work, I was only 20 minutes late. Well, the owner's 23-year-old son managed the place and informed me that his new policy was that I would have to surrender half of my tips for the night as punishment for being late. I told him that I didn't think that was very fair, especially since I was only 20 minutes late for a 5-hour shift, and I'd never once been late, and I'd called ahead. He literally said tough crap, don't be late. I told him to go frick himself and walked out. When I told my co-workers what happened, 4 other people quit, right on the spot because they'd had enough of the dude's power tripping bulls. Don't frick with people's money. Gee, I wonder where that tip money would have gone. The boss went off on a tirade on me for something that wasn't my fault and I got him to scream people like you are expendable pieces in this company and I can replace you tomorrow if I wanted to. 80% of the engineers quit the next day, simply didn't show up, including me. From what I know, the entire project folded because my now ex-boss couldn't find people to replace us because no one wanted to do the kind of work he was looking for at the salary he was paying. Cancelled all raises and bonuses for everyone except the CEO, his wife, financial and HR, and his son. Utterly useless IT. In a year where we have record profits and brought in almost double the clients on top of announcing they aren't looking to hire more people when we were already overwhelmed. Good part about it was when the majority of us quit they lost almost every single client shortly afterwards to their competitors and the company is now defunct. This feels really good to read. They decided after 6 years it was time to do a drug test. Even lost the CEO in that great idea. The CEO reports to the board of directors. The board wanted to get rid of the CEO for cause. Everyone else was collateral. Many years ago in high school I worked at a movie theater. The place was pretty poorly run from the moment I started there. We never got paid on time and management was basically a bunch of lazy jackasses who sat in the office talking all day and never actually did any managing. It would have been hard for things to have gotten any worse, but after a couple of months they brought in new management who seemed to want to make it their personal mission to run the theater as poorly as possible. They first decided to implement a new policy requiring all projectionists to wear ties, despite the fact that projectionists are never seen by the public. Not to mention that tiny little detail that the projectionists worked around giant, rapidly spinning objects that a tie could get caught in. Management refused to reconsider the policy and every single projectionist quit as a result. They then decided that the door people, of which I was one, who were always scheduled 7 days a week, would now only be scheduled on the weekends, and refused to reassign any of us to concessions on the weekdays so we wouldn't lose hours. As a result, almost every single door person quit, including me. After that they started imposing impossible cleanliness standards on concessions. Things like requiring them to scrape popcorn kernels out of the cracks in the trim behind the popcorn machines. Concessions was there until 5 AM every night trying to meet their standards. Most of the concession people quit as a result. By my count the theater went from a staff of about 50 to a staff of about 12 in 3 weeks. I swung by about a month after I quit and found out that entire management staff had been fired and replaced yet again by an entirely new one. Ones who actually seemed to be running the theater properly. My best guess is that the previous management had been told to whip the theater into shape and they were idiots who had no idea how to effectively do that. Or they were there simply to cut staff, to be the bad guys. Now the new managers come in, hire a bunch of people, but fewer than 30, and look like winners to the 12 people that stayed. Maybe. Sometimes I get suspicious. Word slipped out that the whole accounting department was being replaced, so they all resigned all at once. When I was 16, I worked in the concession stand at a minor league baseball stadium. Minimum wage at the time was $5.15 HR. This job paid $8. and it was always in the evenings, so it was perfect work for a high school student. The only bad thing was our management was terrible. The main manager would throw toddler tantrums about once a shift over stupid bulls, like not ordering enough of a specific beer. She did the ordering, or running out of pre-cut lemons for tea. One night the stadium was running a promotion and it was incredibly busy, easily 2-3x the normal volume of customers. We were all working our asses off handling multiple roles each with absolutely no downtime. Although we all cleaned as we worked, nobody had a chance to do thorough cleaning for the whole shift because of the never-ending horde of hungry baseball fans. The manager showed up 3-4 hours late per usual and throws the biggest freaking tantrum ever over the unswept floor. Finally, she announces, "Listen up you lazy fricks. Minimal work gets minimal pay. Everybody is being paid minimum wage tonight because you slobs won't clean up anything." Both of our bartenders and the bar back quit on the spot, which caused a chain reaction. We all took off our aprons and hats to leave. She blocked the exit and was red in the face from screaming. So one of the cooks climbed out of one of the big serving windows where we served customers. So I did the same and most of the staff followed. Bear in mind that this all happened in front of like 200 plus customers. Of course, my final paycheck got lost, so I had to file a wage theft complaint with the Texas Workforce Commission. Company changed from 5 8-hour shifts to a 12-hour shift rotation. I worked at a factory after they changed from a 8-hour rotation to a 12-hour rotation. For most people, the extra time off in the schedule was better than working fewer hours at a time. For some, though, their jobs went from 9-5 MF to the 12-hour rotation that included nights. They all quit. Oh fricking boy, I worked at Buffalo Wild Wings for a few years as a line cook. 2 different stores, same fricking pay. It was the type of work where you ask for a raise and they scoff and say yeah, me too. Anyways, I had been pretty dead set on quitting sooner or later. Our kitchen was very small. Most people ended up closing 4-5 days a week with doubles on the weekends, while still attending school full time as it was a college town. On Super Bowl freaking Sunday, a useless co-worker who ducked out in the bathroom most the shift finally stopped showing. And in response the managerial staff delegated closing to my pal Jay. Dude was a freaking delight to be around. Hands down the best co-worker ever. Jay had told them that due to being a full-time student, he no longer wanted to be first in last out, 4 PM to 12 AM, 1 AM on the weekends. They basically told him to go frick himself, and that they don't have any more shifts for him. Immediately, me and one other cook walked to the office and quit on the spot. Buffalo Wild Wings lost 4 cooks on Super Bowl Sunday, leaving them with 7 full-time students on the schedule. It was a managerial crap show. I was hired by the new owners to replace the existing manager. I was under the impression that he was moving on to another job somewhere. So after about 4 days I ask him where he's headed and if he's excited. He just looks blankly at me and says, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm just training you as the assistant manager." Right. The look I gave him must have been a great tip-off because he got up and walked into one of the new owner's offices. After about 30 seconds they were screaming at each other, then he just storms out of the office, grabs his stuff, give me the finger, and leaves. Over the next few days I'm trying to calm things with the employees. They're not faulting me, but now have a very bad taste in their mouths about the new ownership. Over about a 7-10 day time period my team shrank from 15 people down to 3. I hobbled along with that the best I could while we tried to hire new people, but the new owners were offering so little we had trouble finding people. After 3 months or so of that I started to get fed up and overwhelmed, and when the owners started to get on me about missed deadlines I had it. We were still only at 5 people, 2 of which were brand new and still training. They didn't allow me to refuse work or push deadlines out. They expected the same output as a 15-person team. So after my 3rd day in a row of being berated for missing a deadline that was impossible to make, I quit. Worked at a Wendy's and one of the regional managers started running a store because they wouldn't find new managers to replace the old ones. Well anyways, this guy practically ran the place into the ground. Before he started running the store most everyone liked working there as it was a good environment. A few months after, a couple of people quit because of him, and one day I roll in at 9 to help open the store and he comes out to my car as soon as I park. I was 15 minutes early and usually just sat in my car until 9, and tells me, Hey, I needed to start early because the 3 openers just quit on me. We managed to get the store open and had a number of people from other stores help run the place until the people from the next shift came in. A couple days later I hear the full story of what happened from a coworker. The regional manager is supposed to be at the store at 7 or so, and the openers 30 minutes later. He didn't actually show up until 8:30, so when the openers, already peeved being at work really early and not being on the clock, saw the regional manager roll in and knew it was gonna be an awful shift, all decided that they were done with him and just quit right there. So at least 6 people quit because of him by the time I left the place. Probably more left after me. I did landscape construction. The cheap ass owner kept taking bigger and bigger projects while never hiring more help. We were all overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious as heck. One of our foremen quit and I followed suit a few days later. 2 more guys quit the next day. He was down to 3 guys for the obscene amount of work he wanted to do. Of course everything gets way behind schedule, but he's convinced it's not his fault at all. He went out of business less than a year later. I was working for a very large IT company. Before the tech bubble burst, we had a meeting with our new director and the VP. They were tired of people complaining about things that should be changed at the job and how they managed people. So they sat around 200 of us down in our auditorium, and the director said she didn't want to hear any more complaints on how she was running things, and if we didn't like them there was the door, and that there was no way we'd leave such a great job. Well, there was a mass exodus and probably close to 50 people left within 2 months. She and the VP were auged and given 0 reports. They were gone after a round of layoffs happened shortly after. I thought you were gonna say that it happened on the spot. Like she said in a rhetorical way, if you don't like it then there's a door. And then to her shock the entire auditorium stands up and files out. I'm gonna pretend that's what happened because it's funnier. They laid off half the company with no warning. This included a gentleman who was less than a year from retirement and had been there for 35 plus years. The company was shocked when half the remaining people abandoned ship shortly thereafter. At one of my old jobs, new management took over and she was just awful. She stripped me of a promotion that the previous manager gave me that I worked my ass off for, put trainees on a loan during a holiday, just a whole bunch of crap. Like 5 of us got together after the final straw and quit together. Same thing happened at my old job. My sister took my job because I moved away and she needed one. She told me that the new manager was useless. She would give herself weeks off at a time. The trucks would never be unloaded on time and she would overwork everyone else. My sister quit with everyone else when they quit. Tattoo shop owner, who lived in another state, hired some butthole to come revamp the shop. I had been managing for 3 years at this point and he just expected me to teach him how to do my job so he could replace me. That guy had no clue how to run a shop. Plus the owner had been embezzling money for her coke habit and had blamed the longest standing artist at the shop for lost revenue. Accused him of stealing. I did the books. No one was stealing. She was nuts. Anyway, all the artists and I mutinied and left at the same time. Fricked them over good. With that idiot at the helm, the shop didn't last a year after we all left. What's your frick this, I quit story? Started my first job at 15 as a dishwasher for a friend's family's new Korean restaurant. They were my neighbors. My typical workday was 4 PM to 9 PM on the clock. Afterwards I was expected to stay and help close shop, and instead of getting paid for those extra 3 hours I was given a meal for compensation. To be fair, there are laws prohibiting minors from working too long or too late, and honestly I didn't mind it as the food was incredible. After about a year I'm now 16 and due to the minimal wait staff I was expected to work as a waiter busboy in between dishes. Fair enough. I was getting sick of the same old anyways. So I came in during the week to start training, and since they knew I was already familiar with the menu and whatnot, I wasn't a shadow, I was just on my own and winging it. I made a mistake, that is not remembering soup or salad, so I went back upstairs to ask, and when I returned with my answer I was insulted by my manager for not taking this seriously enough. Alright. A couple months go by and I'm waiting tables and dishwashing all while being micromanaged by my manager. Well, one weekend a Mardi Gras parade was being held downtown where the restaurant is located, so it'd easily be one of our busiest days that year. I was scheduled for 4 PM to 10 PM, but they asked if I'd come in that morning around 8 or so. About an hour or two into my new shift, there was a mountain of dishes I was being expected to maintain while also waiting tables. My manager walks into the back where I am and the dialogue goes like this. Leif, what are you doing? Washing dishes? Go ask table 6 if they need refills. Yes, ma'am. I walk out the back and to the front of the store while she's tailgating me and pick up the pitcher of water. As I pick it up, she asks, do you even know what you're doing? At this point I'm pretty fed up and kindly respond with, yeah, I know how to pour water. She didn't like that and told me that I need to look at her with respect and that if I didn't like it here I should just leave. So I left them with mountains of dishes and thirsty customers. Know your worth. Working at a tech support call center, I put in for a day off for my birthday a month in advance. Boss forgot to process my request and said I couldn't get it off when I asked about it closer to the date, saying something about time off requests being locked due to upcoming trainings. Those trainings were 2 weeks after my birthday. I used to work at a bowling alley in the cafe kitchen when I was like 19. One particular night, I was the only one in the kitchen during a slammed rush. I get everything out, somehow, in a timely manner, clean the kitchen, then go it for a smoke. The GM walks out a minute later and proceeds to ream me, telling me I am a lazy no good piece of crap, etc. etc. I finish my smoke, go back in, pull off my uniform shirt and name tag, set it on the cafe counter and walk out the front door without a word. Frick you, Paul. I interviewed for a corporate accounting role because public accounting was much less pay and a lot more hours. Was told in the interview that it was show up between 8-9, leave between 4-5. There'd be no more working late nights or having to work on weekends, which was great. I took the job and within 2 months realized they were lying through their teeth. First off, there was absolutely no training on their processes. I was given enough work for 3 people, with no direction on how to do it. My manager was so scatterbrained, he could never give me any help when I asked. No one talked for 8 hours a day, and it was just an unbelievably bad work culture. I'd get to work usually at 8:30, and leave at 4:30 while eating lunch at my desk. I came in one day and was told, since you're leaving so early, I can only hope you're working from home. Then the next week, we're told we have to come in for a full day Saturday because we had New Year's Day off that Monday. My final straw was when I left at 2:30 one day for a doctor's appointment. When I came in the next day, my manager pulled me into a room and said that I didn't have enough accrued PTO to do that, and he was going to dock my pay in a salaried position. Went in the next day, told him it wasn't working out and put my 2 weeks in. On my last day, he told me I could leave at 11:30, so I did. When I got my final paycheck, he docked my pay for the remainder of that day. Luckily, the recruiter who got me the job followed up to ask what happened, and I was completely open and honest with her. Apparently, that manager has a very high turnover rate for the position I was in, and the recruiter told me that the CFO is looking into replacing him. I'm sure the CFO looked into it, then his wife said he couldn't fire her brother and so he got promoted instead. I was in the same position for 2 years and was actively looking at other positions within the same company. The bosses knew about it. It was just time for a change and to advance my career. Great opportunity came up and I was offered the position. However, my current leadership blocked me because I received a promotion 6 months prior. That promotion was literally an automatic email that said, congrats, you're now level 2 instead of level 1, because I had met my sales attainment and completed all my yearly trainings. Literally an automated email stopped me from getting promoted and bosses said I had to wait another 18 months. Left that company and went to a competitor doing the same thing for better pay and significantly more support. I had a similar situation. My then boss told me they were trying to work on it so that I could interview in the other department I wanted to go in. Later I found out that they were doing nothing since they wanted to keep me. Decided that was the last straw with the other BS going on and put in my 2 weeks. My boss had my crew and I cut corners on a job. I was fairly new to the position and took what he said as the way it was supposed to get done. Inspectors then came and checked the job because of an unrelated screw up by another company and in turn found out what we had done. Boss then blamed the whole thing on me and denied he ever told me to do it. It was done. Spent the next 2 days replacing all previous work to the way it should have been. Boss then told me that he was not going to pay me for the days of work, 14 hours each day. because I was fixing my frick ups. All the while during the 2 days getting called a fricking idiot and a liar. Frick you. I quit. Short story. Boss tried to cut corners, got caught, blamed it on me, then refused to pay me to fix it to try and recoup some of the losses he took. I quit. In the US, wage theft not to pay you for hours worked and is a criminal, not a civil violation, I think. I was a new sous chef at a country club. Chef wouldn't let anyone but himself do the ordering. His ordering method was to go over a sheet of paper hanging on the line where people wrote down what we were out of. Not what we were nearly out of, but what we were completely out of. Anytime I'd try to add items that we were close to out of on, he'd lose his crap. We were constantly out of things. One day, we had a huge Easter breakfast event. Dumb head chef didn't order near enough eggs and we were out of all sorts of other random items. I was out front making omelets for members, ran out of eggs and stood around for 15 minutes waiting for more while the members became increasingly frustrated then angry. Went to the back to see chef yucking it up with the floor manager. Handed him my apron and told him to pound sand. Was at that job for less than 2 weeks. But we're out of sand. Waitressing at a small cafe. Owner was also the manager cook. One day, we were in the weeds, getting thrown around left and right, and finally when it slows down, the other line cook messed up. So the owner, who already had several screaming meltdowns, picks up a plate and throws it right at the server alley. It broke on the wall near my head. So I took off my apron and waddled my pregnant butt on home. Frick that. It closed a few weeks ago, which wasn't surprising. Arrived at the bar to work my shift only to discover that the owners had sacked my manager because there was, in their view, too much wastage. At the time, he was recovering from major surgery on his arm. He had 3 young children and an 8 months pregnant wife. They thought they were losing money because not every drop of beer poured went into somebody's drink, which is just a fact of life in a bar, and not because their idle Torag son-brother, father-son owner duo, kept coming in with his mates and demanding we give them drinks they didn't have to pay for. Quit on the spot, went to the manager's son's christening a while later. A year or 2 after that was told the bailiffs had come to visit the bar and left with quite a lot of furniture. Couldn't have happened to bigger C. Let me guess, the owners had never worked in a bar before and it was something they did on the side. I proved to the CIO, using math, that the help desk could not lower its abandon rate to an acceptable point without hiring more people. She responded by telling me that my team just didn't have enough discipline and then I got written up. I quit the next day and told my team they will replace me with a manager whom the CIO will let hire more people. I was right. Was volunteering at a local charity shop at the weekend. As it turns out, most of the non-paid volunteers were conscripted from job seekers or community service or whatever. They had to turn up to get their welfare payments etc. Anyway, I'd been there about 6 months. Was hard graft at times moving sofas round the shop, up and down 3 floors. It was a nice sunny day and I was taking my lunch break out the back sitting on a sofa at the loading bay doors in view of a public car park, eating a sandwich with my feet up on the railing. All of a sudden some woman who I've never seen before starts swaggling her finger at me like I'm a naughty kid, then shouting at me in a disgusting tone, "Get up, young man, how dare you." She kept ranting on. I'm like, who the heck is this? She get confricked. Slowly I get up and move inside. Turns out she was the area manager. She peed me off so bad. I didn't really have an issue with what she was asking. It possibly didn't give a good impression. It was the way she was speaking to me I had a problem with. I think she thought I was the typical conscript who could be abused without recourse as they had to stay there and take the abuse in order to get their payments. Some customers in the shop heard how she spoke to me and they backed me up, so I knew I wasn't nuts. Told her she could stick my volunteering and I got the heck out of there. Never went back. Made me think, why should I give up my free time to help this bee on a fat salary hit her targets? I doubt she had a charitable bone in her body. I wrote a 2-page letter of complaint to the head office but never did send it. Kind of regret that. Many years ago I worked at a place called Atomic Burrito. I only worked there for 4 days. I was washing dishes and the manager walked by and started yelling at me for using soap. He said soap cost money and we were just putting the same food back in the pans anyways. I quit right there. Nope, the frick right out the door. My wife has one. Her boss suddenly became obsessed with bringing in as many new people as possible. Oddly, he seemed to forget about retaining his current workers. Many, like my wife, were very experienced at this point. You would think that they'd be considered the most valuable employees of the group. My wife had settled into a nice MF schedule, with good hours, 10-5. Suddenly, her boss pulls her in for a meeting and says most of the new employees can't work nights or weekends due to personal conflicts. I'll need you to switch to a 1-9 schedule and work Saturdays. My wife was caught off guard and responded, when you hired me, I told you that I had conflicts in the evenings and weekends, and that I would be able to work within that schedule. The boss got all serious and said, listen, I think I've been more than generous and accommodating of your schedule needs. I think it's time for you to show us some of that same flexibility. My wife started crying immediately and stormed back to her desk. She called me and said that she thought she needed to quit, but wanted to make sure she wasn't crazy. After listening to what happened, I said that boss could go to heck and she should never look back. She took her free water bottle and never returned. I was at my dream job building high performance Corvettes. There were a lot of downsides, not W2, no benefits, long hours, you break it you buy it. Then they introduced a efficiency measurement, where if you were not fast enough you had to work Saturday to make up for it. Measuring efficiency in custom work leads to corner cutting, and in general is impossible, as it's custom. Then I had to push the shop owner's car in to fit some things. It took me 2 hours to wrap up the car I was working on, push it out, move 2 other cars, get the forklift started, and get the car in. It didn't have a motor yet. All not chargeable, all not my fault, all supposed to be made up on Saturday. I quit the next day. I worked for a company for over a year that was contracted to make deliveries for Amazon. The vans they equipped us with were terribly maintained and fully unequipped to handle winter weather. I worked with the company through their first winter, which meant sliding all over the road when it was icy and getting stuck constantly every time we had snow. I never had a major accident, though I did have 2 or 3 close calls where only minor damage was incurred to the van. I decided to stick it out through the summer, when the weather was obviously much better. All summer long they promised us that new and better vans were coming. September rolls around, no vans. October, no vans. November, no vans. That month we got our first real snow. I got back from my route and immediately put in my notice. My boss told me they would be getting new vans by the end of the year. I told her that was nice and walked. First job, working at a little barbecue place with a drive-thru. My day off. Manager calls me at 8:30 am, 30 minutes before we open, saying she doesn't feel good and needs me to open. I rush in and end up working all day. 5 PM rolls around. Manager comes in with the owner of the business, who she's dating. They were at the fair all day and completely forgot they lied to me about her being sick. I bite my tongue and ask if I can go home. They say no and keep me until close 9 PM. At 9 PM I took my shirt off, handed them my keys, and said today was my last day as I walked out the door shirtless. Best part, when I got home my dad was peeved that I quit my job. I told him what they did and said I wasn't making enough money. He looked at my pay stubs and saw they hadn't been paying me overtime the entire time I worked there. He made me go back and demand my overtime pay. When I came in with the pay stubs the manager started crying and gave me cash out of the register to cover my overtime and then some. They called me the next day making sure I wasn't going to report them to the BBB. I didn't, but my dad did. The BBB is Yelp for old people. Should have gone to your state's labor board. I was 20 and had been working in a call center for just over a year. I was promoted to an assistant manager with a new compensation structure that was identical to the other assistant manager. Basically you got your wage, a very small percent of the total office revenue, and then 10% of your own revenue from when you worked on the phone. My immediate manager and office supervisor gave me this without confirming it with the regional manager who was on a 2-month vacation and the doctor. When I got my first check after being promoted there was no bonus. I was told it would be corrected soon. When I got my second check after being promoted there was no bonus. I was told it would be corrected soon. When I got my third check after being promoted there was no bonus and I was told we had to wait for the regional manager to come back and authorize it. I was being paid weekly and worked another 4 weeks under the premise that I would get a lump sum when the regional manager returned. The problem was that I sold significantly more than the other office manager. The back pay had grown to such a large amount that when the regional manager did return, he questioned why the office manager had given me this structure, as he considered it to be too much money. On my next check there was no lump sum and I was told that they were figuring out a new structure. My following shift I stayed home and got a frantic call from the office manager asking me why I wasn't at work. I told him I couldn't afford to go to work. He said, "Why can't you afford it?" "Because I have been getting ripped off for 2 months. Call me back when you have my money or don't call me at all." Never did get paid. I had a manager who just didn't like me. I don't know why. It happens. But she couldn't keep it professional and acted as if every mistake I had made on purpose, just to frick with her. Meanwhile everyone else told me that they were super happy with me and I was a great worker. So she had worked that Saturday, and when I turned on my PC that Monday morning I had about 10 emails from her, all with screenshots and rude remarks like, "Why is it so hard for you to follow the rules and how did you not know this?" While she was the one that trained me. Frick that crap. I'm worth way more than that. Had my annual review after finishing my first year at a retail store and I got a 13-cent per hour raise. A coworker of mine who drunkenly broken into the laundromat grocery store in town to steal beer a few weeks prior got a 14-cent per hour raise, and new employees were making 12 cents more to start than I was 1 year in. Frick this. I quit and frick you, Under Armour. I had a job that had mandatory raises every year. The first time yearly raises came through, new company, I started with them prior to the first annual raise. They gave everyone a 1 cent an hour raise. That's it. Was at a job for 3 years, consistently in the top 3 of my department in terms of performance. Asked my supervisor repeatedly if I could be recommended for advancement promotion and he always told me he was trying his best to get me new opportunities. Found out from a friend in a different department that I'd been considered a top candidate for 4 different promotions and each time my supervisor had blocked it. When I confronted him with this information he told me it was true and he did it because I could never find someone who does what you do without paying them a lot more. Internally said, "Frick this." I quit and found a new job within 3 months. Took all my PTO and on the day I came back I quit 2 hours into the day, leaving him high and dry at a peak time. Frick that dude. I could never find someone who does what you do without paying them a lot more. LOL that they actually said that. What a dirtbag. He's basically saying, "Yeah, I'm screwing you, yeah, frick that dude." I worked for Dollar General for 94 days as a store manager. It was explained to me that it was a 5/1/2 day work week, and if I was fully staffed I could end up making it a normal 5-day work week. The only problem is I fixed my store. Processes were broken when I arrived. Then they asked me to help set up a store. Well, wasn't really asked. I helped with the new store setup, and since they didn't have a store manager lined up I was told I had to run it on top of my normal store. I was then tapped to do another store setup and run a 3rd store. I was working 90 hours a week going between 3 stores. Would open one up, go check on another and close the 3rd because they were all understaffed. 4 days off total in 94 days. I was then sent out of state for a week for training, while still having to run 3 stores from my phone. All through this I ended up interviewing with a competitor, got the job, and when I got back from training I sent my DM a letter of resignation. My new job is great. I have a small store that is easy to manage. Get 2 days off a week. Been there 3 months and already have 2 weeks of vacation. I ended up taking a small hit on salary, but it was worth it. Moral of the story: don't work for DG, it sucks. People that quit their job in a hilarious fashion. How did you do it? I worked for a Midas garage. 1 week we got a new service manager, and up until that point we always inspected, estimated and sold our own jobs. This new guy wanted to inspect the cars and then check the estimates. Early on a Saturday morning, a girl in her 20s with a baby came into the shop and said her brakes were making noise. I took the ticket, test drove the car, and then pulled it in the shop and then inspected the car. I found the LR brake shoe had gone metal to metal. I mic'd the drum. It was okay. Wheel cylinders and springs, Hardware all okay. I estimated the ticket. It came out about $150 to fix the car. I went to the new service manager and handed him the estimate. He went and looked at the car. He didn't even take 30 seconds. And he said I needed to add wheel cylinders, hardware kit and 2 drums to the estimate. I told him all the parts he wanted to replace were okay. He said do it. I just shrugged my shoulders and walked away. He went back to service desk. I walked into a completely crowded waiting area, stood in the middle of the room, and proceeded to tell everyone in the room what the new service manager wanted me to do. I turned around and went to go get my truck to load my toolbox and leave. The service manager tried to stop me from loading my box on my truck. At the time about 5 customers came out and helped me lift the box into the truck, and then started screaming at the service manager. They all wanted their cars put back together and taken off the lifts. It got so bad. One customer called the cops. The service manager called the owner. The cops and the owner showed up. I was putting the girl's wheels back on. The owner came over to talk to me. I told him what happened and what I did. The owner went over to the service manager, who was surrounded by all the pee-off customers, and fired him. I decided at that point I was still going to quit, because the owner was just acting. He told that service manager to do it. At that point, a few other techs were packing their crap up too. As I was walking up my truck to leave, the girl walked up to me and thanked me. She asked if I knew another shop that could fix her car. I decided I would fix it myself. So we went to the parts store, got the parts, went to my house, and redid the brakes. Not to make this whole story even longer, that was in 1989. We've been married for 24 years now. That service manager couldn't get a job at any shop around. I still see him every once in a while, gathering up the grocery carts at Heb. That was in 1989. We've been married for 24 years now. Unexpected ending. I wrote my 2-week notice on a condolence card that said, "I can't comprehend the depth of your loss. Saw someone else do it online, ordered my own and held on to it until a better job offer came along. It went over well. Frick, I wish I had done this. Don't think my boss would have thought it clever though." I managed to find a telemarketing job as one of my first jobs. It sucked and we were treated like animals, but it was close enough that I could walk there from home. I only intended to stay long enough to afford a car. One day, I realized that I had reached my set dollar amount for a car purchase. As a joke, I strayed as far from the sales pitch as possible. I changed my greeting to things like "Hey" or "Sup." I impersonated celebrity voices. People stopped working around me. They just listened in shock. But it completely backfired. It was my highest day of sales ever. I sold 10 times my average. The pit boss was bewildered, which is why I wasn't fired right away. He listened in on all my calls that day. He begged me to stay, but I was out. It's odd. Every story that I've heard of people changing their script for telemarketing companies, it's always had them get more sales. I'm surprised some companies haven't caught on. Worked as a teen for McDonald's for a month or 2 during the winter in the 90s. We were understaffed and they usually had me working the deep sink and taking money at the drive-thru. One day I come in at 4 PM and the breakfast stuff is pilled to the ceiling at the sink because the day shift rolled out without taking care of it, as per usual. There was a snowstorm this particular day, and with the amount of dishes to do and the increasing frequency of running over and taking money from the window during the dinner rush, my hands were beginning to hurt, then going completely numb. I let the manager know this wasn't working out today and get blown off. Frick it, I crawl straight the frick out of the money window without anyone noticing. At least no one on the staff. I get in my car and drive to the parking lot across the street and watch that dinner rush drive-through line back up out of the lot and down the street. Yes, it was petty. So was the job. I'm sure everyone got over it in short order. I just really liked telling the story. As far as some comments suggesting I was acting entitled, I didn't want anything from this company other than the pay for the hours that I worked. I made a choice to terminate the job and I accept that. In fact, I was offered a 10-cent raise, LOL, to come back permanently, which I declined. Either way, this was way more responses than I anticipated over this and it was fun, thanks. Haha, my best friend worked at McDonald's forever and a guy he worked with did this during the dinner rush too. Like, what a way to go out. I used to work for a telecommunications company. My mom was very sick over the last 3 months of her life, so I had to go home most weekends to see her. It's a 6-hour journey to get from where I work to the town where I'm from. When her birthday came around, I requested a couple of days off that I had saved for this specific occasion. Yet, the days off were denied because we were approaching a busy time of year for sales. At this point, I hadn't mentioned what was happening at home, because well, I was always taught that you keep your work and personal lives separate. But I said it to my boss, who, at the time, I saw as a pretty compassionate person. She never took any issue when I got sick or was late for whatever reason. But when I told her, she just looked at me point blank and said, "I don't want to hear this." After that meeting, I went back to my desk and sat there for about 20 minutes, thinking of a solution. That solution was to get my things and just leave. I said goodbye to my friends on my way out, flipped my boss off and just walked out. I went straight to my car and drove back to my hometown that night. It was the best decision I ever made. I got to spend all my time with my mom before she went. We even got to go on a vacation and spend one last week away together because I had the time to do so. I'll never, ever regret walking out that day. Not exactly hilarious, but I had a good chuckle to myself on that drive home. The look on my boss's face will never leave me. It was sweet. To be honest, I didn't think about compassionate leave at the time as my head was in a really odd place at the time. But all in all, I'm a lot better for having left the job. I've moved to a new city and I'm happy in a new job. Really sorry to hear about your mother. You are one of those rare cool people who know where the real priorities lie. As for your manager, the manager fricked up. You are entitled to compassionate leave and it will very likely come up in the exit review. HR is going to have her for breakfast for not going through them first. It's the middle of the lunch rush at the restaurant. It's a gorgeous day but the porch is closed. So myself and this poor middle-aged waitress are taking everyone who expected to sit outside into our room. We're providing crap service because usually there are 5 servers for this many people, not 2. I ask the manager if she wouldn't mind calling people in to open up the porch, which is where all of these people are expecting to sit. She goes off on me. "Are you freaking kidding me?" I exclaim. "You just swore at a manager. You're fired." I was going to be back at college in 2 weeks so I really didn't give a frick. The thing is, she had to cash me out first. So for those 10 minutes I quietly cussed her out in front of everyone until she started screaming her head off in the middle of the restaurant. She was fired a couple weeks later. That's weird. I work at a restaurant and we constantly talk like this to each other, managers and all. Worked at Arby's. When I planned to quit I typed up a formal letter of resignation and put it in an envelope. I walked in and handed my boss the envelope and she said, "Are you quitting?" I stammered no as I walked backwards out the door and booked it out of there. I wasn't very good with confrontation back then. This is the least cool way to quit ever. My boss was a C, had me on a disciplinary for something that wasn't my fault, and had my bonus taken off me. So I found a new job, threw out £2,500 worth of stock as technically the food hadn't been stored away correctly, went above my boss and got head office's backing, then handed my notice in, knowing that it fricked his bonus up too. Frick that guy. I like it. I messed up my manager's manager before I left with some horrible technicalities as she had messed loads of people's pay up. I left on my own accord. She got fired the day after I left. Not my story, but one a co-worker told me. The guy who it turned out I had replaced knew he was going to be fired and wanted to quit ahead of time in style. So he enlisted the help of the guy who told the story, and spent the entire day fashioning a suit of Spartan armor out of cardboard boxes in the back. Then, right as they were closing, because he was still a decent guy and didn't want to make a scene, he donned his armor, walked up to the Atone manager, saluted with his cardboard sword, and with a straight face asked permission to leave your employment to go on campaign. So without waiting for a reply, he saluted again and walked out. I would have thought some details were embellished, but the guy showed me the video. God, I wish the people I supervised quit like that instead of just ghosting one day. My story actually occurred yesterday. I work, for a small landscaping company. It was literally me, my boss, and a coworker. It's important to note that I'm also in the DEP program to head to Navy boot camp in February. My boss had always been a general butthole, making half jokes about how he was just losing money by employing us and how we were just causing him undue stress, or talking crap about every past employer or employee of his, and making extremely judgmental comments about everyone he came into contact with. Tuesday, I realized that we would be mowing on Wednesday, and typically that means that we get back late. I had a mandatory Navy meeting I need to be at. I told him. He told me it was no big deal because he had family stuff he needed to back for. Yesterday, at about 12:30, I checked to make sure that we were still going to be back by 3 or 3:30 so I could attend my meeting. He replies, "Nah, I pushed back my stuff so we don't have to be back by 4:30. I would miss 3/4 of the meeting by being back that late." So I reminded him about my meeting. He shrugged and told me, and I quote, "Well, it sucks for you. Tell them your boss is in butthole." I had turned in my 2-week notice the Friday before last, so as of yesterday I only had 2 days left working for him. I proceeded to have my dad meet us at the next yard we mowed. Boss told me to get back in the mowing truck, and I said no. I told him that if he wouldn't allow me to prioritize my mandatory meetings over the job that I had 2 days left at, I wouldn't prioritize his schedule. I told him to text me on Friday for when I can pick up my paycheck and left. I worked overnights at a gas station through college. After being scheduled to work my 3rd Christmas in a row, on Christmas morning, I gave my boss a card that said I quit. Voice. Not me, but a great story. One guy I worked with hired a mariachi band to follow him into our boss's office. Unfortunately for him, the boss was on vacation, so he ended up quitting over the phone and was so pissed he spent the $300 on the band. I worked for a used car dealership briefly as a salesman. Frick car sales. By the way, I was moving to a new city with my girlfriend, now wife, when she went to grad school, so I had a definite end date in July. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have many expenses. I asked for a Saturday off to go to my wife's brother's wedding. They informed me that we weren't allowed to take Saturdays off. A few days later, I had sold a car, but there was a delay that was not my fault. My mother and I were supposed to get lunch together. I asked if I could go and have someone else close the sale. My manager informed me that if I did, that person would get paid for it. I spent over 2 hours standing around with my proverbial dong in my hand while my mother waited at a Ruby Tuesday for me. Then, a few days before my brother-in-law's wedding, I saw someone put in his 2 weeks notice. The manager looked him up and down and said, "Nah, you're done now." So what do I know? They're buttholes who don't respect me, and if I try to give them customary notice, they'll shitcan me. So frick it. I decide to go to the wedding. It's 8:30 on a Saturday morning and my shift is supposed to start at 9 o'clock. I call my manager. "Yeah, Craig, I won't be in today." "What? You have to come in?" Number. I actually quit. And then I went to the wedding and had a wonderful time. It wasn't hilarious, I guess, but deeply satisfying. My friend quit Taco Bell right in the middle of his shift by writing "frick you. I'm out" on the floor with the big sour cream gun. I was witness to a classic quit job. Was out a local pizza place with my family. It was around 6ish and the place was packed with families and other patrons, mainly HS kids, for the dinner rush. All of a sudden this kid comes running out from behind the counter where you get your food. He whips off his shirt and shorts and jumps on a table in front of a packed restaurant and exclaims very loudly, "I'm quitting because the manager that runs this place is a total butthole and won't give me a day off. Oh yeah, I pee in the pizza sauce too. Thank you. Have a good night," and grabbed his clothes, dismounted and then ran out the door. It was dead quiet for about 5 minutes. Then the manager came out and apologized, and 10 minutes later, people went back to their meals. Still remember that like it happened yesterday. I had landed a job at an IT company that had been struggling the last few years. It was a nightmare scenario, but they were promising the sky and moon, so I decided to take it anyway on a 6-month contract to hire basis. I was there 2 months and it was a full-on dumpster fire. I won't bore with the details, but after a month they had so many people quitting, I got moved to the tech support. At first I was told it was a temp thing. Then in the all-company meeting, My boss just took upon on himself to make it permanent without really asking me. That was the last draw. Within a few days, I had found another gig and went into his office and told him I was taking the rest of the day off. This is how the rest of the conversation went. Boss, okay Platinum, we'll see you tomorrow. Me, yeah, I don't think I'm coming in tomorrow. Boss, okay, so when do you think you'll? Me, or the next day after that or the day after that. Boss, Platinum, what are you saying? Me, well Jeff, I'm quitting, and this is my last day. Boss, you can't quit, you have a 6-month contract. Me, Jeff, you can certainly try and force me to work here, but you really can't. So I'm leaving now. I started to walk out and he followed me, yelling at me that I couldn't just quit. I had a contract. He's going to call my recruiter. Then his last attempt to insult me was the best. His last words to me as I exited the building was, "I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." That was almost 5 years ago. The company went under 8 months after I left, and Jeff is now selling insurance somewhere in Nevada. Yeah, blackballing someone from an entire industry is very, very illegal. A guy from my work years ago came in high and the boss figured it out. She brought him into the office to fire him and with a cop to escort him out. For his final stand, he came real close to her face and said, "In a world of darkness, where you carried the only light, I still wouldn't follow you," and left. I've seen couldn't let water downhill on a management survey before too, but that one is also great. I worked as a mechanic at Pep Boys several years ago. While I worked there, some of us discovered that if the drainage pipe in the shop were pressurized, the toilet would shoot water out of the bowl. The service manager at my store was a piece of crap. The day that I quit, I waited until he went into the bathroom to take a dump. I filled up a cheater, a device used to seat a tire onto a wheel, and released about 200 C all at once into the drainage pipe. The toilet freaking exploded. The manager screamed, and then comes storming out of the bathroom covered in crap. That's a really crappy thing to do. I used to work in invoicing. My boss was a massive, micromanaging bee, the type that has literally nothing better to do than nitpick because they, for some reason, think that that's how you properly manage. This went on for about 2 years before I'd had it. I took a big old dump in the bathroom in our office, total of about 6 people that worked there, precariously placed my boss's business card on the massive log, and then left it there in the toilet before going to her desk and quitting right then and there. She tried to come back at me with some spiteful crap, but I shut her down, telling her that she's a crap boss and she's the sole reason that I'm quitting this job. Best day ever. Best dump ever too, now that I think of it. I went all freaking out. I gave my boss a respectful letter of resignation and thanked him for the opportunity. Jitwrecked. Straight savage. I worked at Home Outfitters when I was 17. Worked cash 1 day per week and stocked shelves, cleaned up the mess of the back room a few other times during the week. Now when I say mess, imagine everything you need to clean the place, plus overstock, plus using the freaking cardboard crusher as a storage unit. This back room was a mess. Anyway, one of my cash days I rang up a discount wrong. Ended up charging a guy $72 for his purchase rather than $85. Boss yelled at me, told me I was going to pay for it and that he was going to be speaking to the manager about possibly letting me go. There was his mistake. I was working this job as extra cash. I didn't need the money. First thing I did in the 4 hours I had left for this shift, I relabeled the entire vacuum and kitchen sections wrong. I am saying wrong names, pricing, stock codes, everything. 2 hours left. I called the province's workplace safety board and emailed them over 20 photos from my phone on problems in the back room on the floor. I then turned off all the cash registers, minus the one being used, right before the 7 o'clock rush. These things were ancient. They took about 20 minutes to boot up. I then asked to see my manager for a moment. He approached me at the front where I said the following: "Good luck with the labor board. I'm out of here." It was the best moment of my life at the time, but in hindsight I should have just left. Funniest part of this whole ordeal was a friend who worked there as well mentioned that it took them all 4 or 5 hours after closing to relabel everything. The machines shorted out when they tried to boot them all, and the next day they were shut down for 48 hours to get their backroom sorted. Manager got fired by corporate. The assistant manager who yelled at me quit because of the pressure. And for my cherry on top, they had mentioned at orientation in writing that if you had first aid courses you got 25 more per hour. I worked a total of 300 plus hours for this place. I emailed my first aid course, that I had through being a part-time army reservist, to corporate and they sent me a check in the mail for the 25 per hour. $75 was a lot to 17-year-old me. Now that I reread this, I was a bit of a dong at that time. Managers of Reddit, what's the fastest you've had a new hire quit? My uncle retired and, after some time had went by, he decided to get a part-time job at a bait store for some extra spending money. The afternoon boss told him to be there at 8 am. But when he showed up at 7:45 am and knocked on the door to be let in, the morning boss told him that he was 15 minutes late. The guy started to get in his case about how he was expected to be there a half hour before his shift to straighten up and restock shelves. My uncle told him he could take his job and shove it up his butt. He was back on the road by 7:48. And your uncle was well right to do so. I'm not going to work a half hour off the clock for anything. I was the manager at a diesel truck shop in college. My boss hired a mechanic who was supposed to have all his own tools. Dude shows up with a toolbox the size of a lunchbox on his start day. He made up some story about slowly bringing his tools over every day because his car was small. Whatever. I put him on an easy job replacing a thermostat on a medium duty pickup truck. The book time on this job was like an hour. My day had gotten busy and I realized that like 3 hours has passed and homeboy hasn't even come in to even grab the new thermostat from me yet. So I go out to check on him and couldn't believe what I was seeing. The intake was off. The radiator was removed. All the coolant hoses were removed and sitting in a cardboard box. There was coolant and oil all over the floor. It was totally insane. The mechanic had taken some drugs apparently and was on a different planet, rolling around under the truck. No reason to be doing this whatsoever to replace the thermostat on this truck. His phone was blasting the Redneck Kings of Comedy and he was covered in sunflower seed shells that he had spit all over himself. I turned off his phone and asked him what the frick was going on, and he started crying, saying he couldn't figure out where the dang thermostat was. I told him to go the frick home. It took one of my other mechanics like 2 hours to undo all the destruction he had done and we had to put all new fluids in the truck because this dodo drained them all out into dirty pans all over the floor and all of 30 minutes to replace the thermostat and get the truck back to the customer. My boss had hired this idiot, so I told him to call and fire him. The next day, he showed up to collect his paycheck for 3 hours of destruction and his lunchbox filled with tools. He made apologies, stole our yard dog that had lived at the shop for years, and we never saw him again. It was kind of sad and endearing right up until he stole the yard dog. I used to work at a really small grocery store that usually only had one manager and one cashier in the store at all times. I had put up my 2 weeks notice and prior to leaving trained up the new manager to take my place. The next day after I left, from what I was told, the manager quit 2 hours into their first solo shift, leaving the poor cashier behind who had been there even less time than the new manager. Only one manager and one cashier on duty. So, Walmart. Zing. I once needed a new graphic designer in my unit, so I, as was procedure, told HR what I needed and they came back in a couple weeks with someone they had hired. He met us all, sat down and was very confused. He was an accountant, not a graphic designer. They had hired him as an accountant and asked him lots of accounting questions. Nothing at all to do with the position. HR was called. He left with them. I never saw him again. I hope they kept him on as an accountant. Any company where HR does the hiring for a skilled position without the group team leader present is a no-go for me. The first day, I worked at a phone store in a very Hispanic neighborhood. He claimed to be fluent in Spanish in the interview. I probably should have verified that. He learned pretty quickly that he'd really need the Spanish, so he got super stressed and stormed off. I later found out he took a $900 Camo Galaxy S5 with him when he left. G let me just leave my SSN and all my personal info with this place, then rob them of a $900 piece of technology. I have had a number of construction laborers quit on the first day, including several roofing laborers who started at 7 AM, climbed down the ladder for 10 AM break, and never came back. I did that. What I was told the job was going to be was not the job they wanted me to do. Painting equals roofing. Frick if I am going to do roofing for minutes wage. Hired a delivery driver, construction materials. First day he had a 26-foot box truck and 3 stops in the Frederick MD Market, about 2 hours from our warehouse. He leaves at 7 AM and is back at 11:30 AM. I see him and say wow, that was really fast. He says he's going to get some cigarettes and will be right back in. Gets in his car and leaves. We open the truck and everything is still there, exactly as loaded. He doesn't answer his phone and never comes back. We never found out what happened. For the next 6 months, anytime anyone in the warehouse was having a bad day, they'd say I'm going to get cigarettes. He just really wanted to drive the truck around. Employee here. Had a guy get hired, was sent to get his drug test, and never came back. We tell them about the drug test when they fill out an application and also when they interview. Those were the worst drugs he'd ever tested. He didn't even get high. The fastest was the one who was a no-show their first day. It's all good. About 8 months later they contacted us to say they were ready to come to work. I used to manage a grocery store. We had to come in at 6 AM to start throwing the loads and getting the store ready for the day. Had a new hire come in 5 minutes late on her first day, at 6:05, just to give me her locker key and tell me that she has never woken up this early in her life and that she can't do the job. Used to work overnight stocking in a grocery store. Watched several people quit a few hours into their first shift. Apparently they just assumed they could handle how tired they'd get. I worked at a prison. We had a woman come and get hired for her first day, which is where we start the fingerprint scan to upload data to the feds and do your physical and TB test. She had gone down and not come back after 3-4 hours. We called down to see what was up. Turns out she was wanted 2 states over for identity theft and was now being housed at intake. 15 minutes. I hired someone to work in a manufacturing plant. We did a tour of how hot the floor would be during the interview. No problem. First day at work, he walked out after 15 minutes of work because it was too hot. To be fair, strolling through a hot place and working in a hot place is totally different. I'm not a manager, but one time I went on vacation for a week. I came back and a few days later heard people talking about Frank or something. Had no clue who that was, so I asked. Apparently he'd been hired, started working, stopped coming in, and apparently quit, was fired all in the week I was on vacation. They tried to replace you but it didn't work out. We hired a girl for a live-on job. I worked on an university campus. She was hired, drove down like 3-4 hours, began her first day, apparently got some other offers that were closer to home, realized she made a huge mistake, packed her stuff and was gone that evening. Dang wizards. I was a quitter. Sorry. I went to interview at my dream job, came home crying because I thought I had bombed the interview. Called up the grocery store that had offered me a job as soon as you get into town. The next morning, I go in and do the training exercises and start learning to scan groceries. The HR person who was in charge of my paperwork and training went home without telling me. So after a while of what do I do next? Do I have a boss? I've been here 6 hours. Am I supposed to take a lunch? I got a phone call from the museum saying I got the dream job. I rushed out of there so fast I had to hang the grocery store apron on the cart return because I accidentally took it with me. Not technically me, but a manager in our company was struggling to hire someone at one location. I bumped into an old friend I used to be a server with, and she said she was unemployed and looking. Linked them up. First day she came in and said, "Yay, this isn't for me. I'm more of a manager personality," and quit that same day. B. You don't have a job and I gift wrapped one for you at one of our best locations. We've had store managers ask for a demotion because they made more money as a clerk than they did as a manager. It's not about the money, it's about being able to delegate to other people. We hired a machinist in training for our injection mold building division. Guy had run some CNCs before, but on a production basis. Basically we'd need about 6 months to switch him over. When he started we were balls the wall busy. All machines were dirty because you'd have 3 or 4 being run by one guy. His first task was to clean out one of the machines so he could get working with it. That seems below me. When I drive Uber no one expects stupid chores from me. He made it less than 30 minutes. Honestly, in the 15 years I've been around this industry, I could tell you another 30 or so stories. Out of all the jobs with machines, I like cleaning the best. You can't really frick that one up. How about a story about the opposite? An employee refusing to be fired? I wasn't there when this happened, but I shared an office with this legend for a couple of years. It was a governmental agency and they had hired a new supervisor. This particular employee and the new supervisor just did not get along. It was like oil and water, cats and dogs. Constant friction between them. For no reason and for every reason. He got wind that she was planning to fire him in a day or two. So he stopped going to work. Figured that if she couldn't find him, she couldn't fire him. He refused to answer his phone. He refused to return messages. This was before email was widespread, but I'm sure he would have ignored that too. And then a miracle happened. The supervisor got fired a couple of weeks after he stopped coming into work. The new acting supervisor, who was the person who hired me, actually called this guy and told him it was safe to come back to work. So he did. BTW, this acting supervisor was a great guy. After I had been there less than a year, and consequently didn't have much leave built up, I had a very serious health issue. It kept me out of work for an entire month. After my vacation and sick leave ran out, he just started marking me as being present with the understanding that I would work every extra shift possible when I got back to pay back the time. It was one of the nicest things anyone has ever done for me. I left that job years and a year ago, but saw on Facebook a couple of years ago that the legend retired with a full pension. And here I thought that he'd return to work and get fired by the new manager. I worked at a place where I didn't get to hire the interns, but had to manage them. My VIP just hired pretty women. There were great interns and terrible ones, but Beth took the cake. She came in 30 minutes late. I started to take her through how our business worked, what our industry was like and what she'd be working on. She was on her phone and got pee when I told her to put it away. She refused to take notes while I took her through all this. I then sat her down at 10:30 and asked her to clean a list of potential clients in Excel. She laughed and said she was getting a coffee, which I assumed was from our office. 45 minutes later she shows up again with a Starbucks, and 20 minutes after that she says she's going on lunch. I told her she used her lunch up to get that coffee. She need to get some work done. She laughed again and left. Didn't come back the rest of the day. I sent a note to her professor about this. The next morning I got a call from her professor apologizing for her behavior and letting me know she would be failing her internship. My VIP was P because Beth seemed like just the kind of person we need around here. We had an intern start who had been emailing us 24/7 for months asking for work experience, how it was their passion, etc etc. They also interviewed really well at the informal coffee interview we had with him, where we explained what the internship would entail. They arrived early for day 1. Seemed really positive during the morning induction. We got them set up with a desk and their email login, etc. When it got to lunch, we told them they had just over an hour. They were welcome to go out and get lunch and eat it outside, or in our canteen. It was up to them. He said he would go out and get some lunch and see us back in a bit. He never came back. We got really worried. He wouldn't pick up his mobile. We went looking for him. We emailed him, and then we had to call his emergency contact, just in case he had been hit by a bus or something. We eventually got a text message from him that just said, "Sorry, I don't think I'll be coming back." Not a manager, but I work for a decently popular e-commerce store. Despite our store's popularity, our headquarters location was pretty run down at the time. We had a new social media manager start, and on her 3rd or 4th day she went to use the bathroom and accidentally walked in on our copywriter pooping. Bathroom door didn't always lock properly. She quickly went back to the main office, grabbed her bag, and we never heard from her again. As someone looking to get into social media management marketing, finding one of my new co-workers pooping would only be a hilarious benefit. Not the manger, but we had a guy show up his first day, after tons of testing, and a paid for flight, just to refuse to clean toilets. He said he would clean everything else but not the toilets. He was a janitor. They bought him a ticket back home. I was hired to work in a stockroom once. I didn't need a job at the time but fancied a bit of extra money. Second shift I got threatened with the sack cause I went to the toilet 3 times in an 8-hour shift. Apparently I should have told them I had a freaking bladder problem on my application. Boss was a generally enormous turd in a few other ways too. But when I didn't need the job and was getting brought into her room to watch CCTV footage of me heading to the bathroom every few hours, I was like, yeah, nah. I didn't need a job at the time but fancied a bit of extra money. Best kind of job to have. Or decide not to have. We hired a guy in a restaurant. He no crap quit in 30 minutes. He was lazy and slow and realized that we all hustled harder than he was willing. We had a good laugh. Called the second on the list, who showed up 45 minutes later and worked a double. That guy stayed there for a year and loved his job. I used to work at a community mental health center. Once we had a new front office person come in for her first day, leave for lunch, and never come back. I actually did this once. Got hired as a dental assistant. Started my first day, and the place was a nightmare. The dentist literally let her dog run around the office and crap on the floor. Aseptic procedures were basically non-existent. Expired and unlabeled materials everywhere. I didn't want to be liable for any of the inevitable fallout, so I just bailed. This summer I got a job as a lifeguard at a certain pool, since the one I really wanted to work wasn't going to interview me till the end of June. First day, manager says they're planning on having me work about 20 hours a week, but for most of June I have to scrounge all my hours off other people because I joined up too late to be put on that month's schedule. Fair enough. I interview for the other pool which is within walking distance and they offer me $10.75 an hour compared to first place offering me state minimum. At that time $9.25 with an imminent increase to $10.10. They want 5 days of my week, however, so I agree to not have a dang day off in my week and plan to have 10-hour shifts at my old job on the 2 leftover days so I can still fulfill the 20 hours. I tell old job boss and he's peeved because apparently despite hiring 3 or so guards after me, my new arrangement means he'll be understaffed and that he was planning on giving me more hours. I felt like it was bulls meant to keep me stuck there more, but I threw him a bone and texted him asking how many hours a week minimum he needed from me to fix his understaffing issue. He doesn't respond for a full 21 hours. When he finally does, it's to ask me to come in early with no actual answer. In the meantime, new job offered me 40 hours a week if I quit the old job, and I fricked off immediately and enjoyed a summer working at a pool within walking distance of my house and with much better behaved patrons. I don't regret it. This is a great one because it was not a low-tier position. I was working at a pharma manufacturing facility and we were hiring a new HR manager. She got the job, shown her office. Basically this desk is not clean enough and that was that she left. Not a manager but the employee. I quit her job the day before my first scheduled shift when the company I was working my last shift at offered me significantly more money. Almost exact same thing happened to me. I had just learned my girlfriend was pregnant and was ready to start making more money in preparation for that. Found a new job pretty quickly and put in my 2 weeks at the current job. The night before the first day of my new job I was offered quite a bit more money and an extra week of vacation days. Needless to say, I took the offer. Working at Jimmy John's. We hire an older woman to be a delivery driver. We tell her to put an apron on because when you aren't driving, you do in-shop stuff. She said she wasn't going to make sandwiches and left. At my JJ location they paid us under minimum. In shop and on delivery, working as a tipped position made us legally capable of refusing non-tipped work. I work at an investment bank in London. After interviewing an internal candidate different division, floor etc, a couple of times called her to offer the role and let her know the salary we could start her off on. She excitedly accepted. I immediately contacted HR via email to put the official wheels in motion, and an hour later she called me back to let me know that she had to retract her acceptance as another internal role she'd interviewed for months ago had suddenly called to offer her that role. No mention of salary, just that she preferred the sound of the other role. A couple of months later I looked her up on the intranet and she's still in her old role. So I'm not sure what happened. A salary negotiation tactic that I didn't bite. Maybe the other role fell through if it existed in the first place? Who knows? A little embarrassing telling HR to ignore my last email though. Probably wasn't about the salary, but the job itself. Or she was advised by someone to not switch. The excuse was definitely made up. I was a supervisor at a grocery store a few years back. A guy I knew from high school got a job at my store and a McDonald's at the same time. He told me that at the end of the month he would quit the job he liked less. The next day he quit from my store. I asked him why he wasn't waiting a month like he planned. Turns out, on his first day at McDonald's, all of the other people on his shift including the manager went out back to smoke and left him running the whole store alone for a couple of hours during the lunch rush. The owner found out and fired everyone except him and promoted him to manager. On his first day, he decided he didn't want to bag groceries after that. I didn't blame him. Once I worked a temp job at a salmon canning factory for a week or two. We got a couple of new temps one day, a girl in her early 20s and a creepy Somalian guy who could have been 25 or 40. Somalian guy spends all day trying to hit on this girl, asking her if she will be his girlfriend within a couple of hours. He then begged her to go on a date with him to McDonald's on our lunch break. I guess he followed her to her car at lunch and started harassing her. She drove off and never came back. There's some real shitbags out there and I feel terrible that women have to put up with people like that. Not a manager but work in an office. This was a few years ago when I was still interning while in college. We had a kid start fresh after graduating college and he was gone 3 days later. He had never worked a job before except being a camp counselor at a hockey camp. He complained that all everyone ever does here is work and that everyone was super old. Yes, we do work during our job. And the average age of his department was like 25. Real life is gonna slap the crap out of him. Worked as an interim assistant manager for a bridal store. We had our amazing manager leave, and the assistant manager that took her place was god awful. I'm talking refused to work even mandatory weekends because there was always a problem with the babysitter for her granddaughter, and we would get written up if we were late. Tried to give me a 0.25 an hour raise after 2 years of raises being frozen. I put in my 2 weeks after that, and I mean that was my response to being offered that. I later found out the district manager had told her to offer me $4, and at one point she refused to hang up the phone with her husband after her lunch, leaving me alone in the store for an hour after my shift and making me late to pick up my son from daycare. She then tried to yell at me for going over hours. All of this is just background to make people understand how crappy of a boss she was. My last week, we had a new hire in alterations come in and do some training. He was only there for 3 hours, and in that 3 hours 2 of the other bridal consultants got into a fight. Not a tiff, a full-on screaming match. That crappy manager moved to the break room and then let them go at it for an hour. I had customers complain, brides leave the store, which not only cost the store money, but the consultants worked on commission. And finally, the new hire came out of alterations, asked me if this was normal, and then said he wasn't going to finish the paperwork because he was confident he could find a job where our long screaming matches didn't occur. He probably wasn't wrong. Workers of Reddit, when have you said frick this, I quit? Years ago I worked in a restaurant and it was Christmas time. This place was supposed to function with 4 waitresses, a busboy, dishwasher, manager and 2 cooks. Only the manager and I showed up. He did the cooking. I took orders, served, bussed tables, washed dishes and so on. During this I accidentally dropped 2 bread plates and they broke. Manager says to me, I'll have to take those out of your pay. I told him that was funny, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. I turned around and grabbed a stack of dinner plates, threw them on the floor and said take those out of my pay too and walked out to leave him with the whole mess. I was 5 minutes late and was chewed out because of this, but they were so keen to forget that I filled in for them the previous day because someone quit on the spot. I too quit on the spot. I quit after working for 4 hours at a sushi restaurant. I asked where the bathroom was and I was told we don't really get bathroom breaks. I left right then and never came back. It was pretty sad. The manager said he understood and wasn't mad at all. Should have just peed on the floor and then quit to really prove your point. I had worked at a university for 23 years. There were over 7,700 staff and I think I had met half of them by then. Working as a senior field IT tech was awesome for the first 20 years. They were very flexible and I had lots of side gigs. In the end the bean counters came in and made things more efficient by outsourcing many tasks. Usually they were the fun things. The last year was very repetitive and mundane. Lots of problems that we couldn't fix because they were someone else's problem. One day I came in and attempted to resolve 7 different problems, and I was shut down on each because they each had their own team of people whose responsibility it was. I said frick this, what do you need me for? Went straight to HR to quit. Belinda, the HR manager, was not your typical cliched type. I'd fixed her PC before and knew her. She said, don't quit today, take the weekend, wait until Monday, and see how you feel then. I took her advice, temporarily retracting my signed resignation, and went home. On Monday the largest round of redundancies were announced in the university's long history. Because of the enterprise bargaining agreement, the payouts were incredible. My accountant, when he saw how much was being offered, suggested they had made a mistake and called on my behalf to check if it was correct. It was effectively 2 years' salary after tax. I would have missed out if Belinda had accepted my resignation. I got hired at Kmart to work in sporting goods. Was told to wear the traditional black pants and red polo. Day 1. Sorry, we can't train you for sporting goods today. We need you to help unload trucks. It's summer in SC. It's 100 degrees and 80% humidity. I'm wearing black pants and a thick polo. No change of clothes. End of day. Sorry about today. We'll start training you tomorrow. Come to work in uniform again. Day 2. Same thing. Day 3. Same thing. Day 4. Same thing. Day 5. Same thing. Day 6. Same thing. Day 7. I came in on my day off to quit. If I wasn't dumb and 17 I probably would have just wised up and brought a change of clothes. I didn't mind unloading the truck, although the sweat-drenched clothes weren't ideal. The real reason I quit was the obvious lack of planning and management. Worked at a mall retail store in college for a couple years. When I was just a lowly peasant the manager was great to work for. Once I became a key holder is when things changed. I learned very quickly why the other key holders didn't last. The manager would make rash decisions that would then be blamed on everyone but her. Last straw was when the evening shift didn't change out some signage and I get in the next morning having no idea there was new signage to be put out. She came in and berated me about the signage not being updated. I walked in the back, dropped my keys off, told her I quit and went to walk out. She grabbed me and told me I need to give a written notice and fax it to corporate, to whom it may concern. I Mike Oxbig terminate my employment effective immediately due to manager's inability to properly treat staff. Faxed it and walked out. She read it after I had already sent it and chased me out, berating me more, claiming I would never get another retail job in this mall. Blah blah blah. 3 weeks later I started at another store in that mall and always made it a point to smile and wave at her when I saw her. When I was 14, I wanted a summer job with my best friend. We went to the fast food shop at the beachside. It was quite popular since it was the only fast food around. We get there on a Friday afternoon and we meet the owner. 50-something man with a big belly from probably the fast food he serves. Tells us we can get there the next morning and people would show us around. We get there at 9 AM like he told us and there was no one. First employees arrive at 10:30 to open. They have no idea we were supposed to work. They tried to help us the most they could but they were cashier with no training for the food stuff. Both their cooks left that week and the owner was doing all the work. We finish our first day without any trouble. Slow day overall. Sunday arrive and we are not prepared for the sheer number of customers. We still have about no idea how to cook the food and how the equipment worked. Owner arrived with a bunch of his friends. We were swamped with people, but he shoved them around a bit and asked us to do 6 hot dogs, 6 fries and 6 Diet Cokes and fast. We knew it was for him, so we told people to wait and we finished their order. Not 30 seconds after, the owner comes back behind the counter and begin to tell us we are crap at our job and that the fries were not cooked enough and that we messed the condiments on the hot dogs. Mind you, there were a lot of customers waiting for their food at that point and they were all looking at us getting yelled at by the owner. I looked at my friend. He looked at me and we both knew what to do. We took our aprons off and told him to frick off. We left him with all the orders right there and then. Never went back there. They closed down about 2 years after. Job got a VIP contract to vaccinate a bunch of elite clients. They rushed. They brought on some extra nurses, barely vetted them and began. Virtually no breaks. And piles of paperwork. They didn't finish ordering and setting up the computers and there was only one computer to chart on like 100 patients a day. Not all the nurses got their clearance for the computer yet either. Scariest part was I had to stop someone from reusing a needle that she didn't realize she used on a previous patient. She told me she only primed it, pushed the air out, but I told her without alarming the patient that it was not suitable. I told her to go away and cleaned up her area, vaccinated the patient and never went back. I was already sick of them only thinking about the bottom line. I worked as a server at a bar during college. The head bartender each day was in charge of assigning tables to the server. There was one bartender who really didn't like me and every time she worked, she would give me the worst tables so that I wouldn't make as much in tips. She also did the scheduling. She started only scheduling me for slow times early in the day, like during lunch when we would have 50% off lunch specials. It sucked, but fair enough. She does the scheduling and I needed the money. Well, it just got worse and worse until I was barely making minimum wage even though I was making close to $20 an hour when I started. One day, during a slow lunch, I was working with a different bartender. When the bartender's shift ended, the other bartender who did the scheduling came in to take over. I was serving a large table of probably 15 people. Probably the best table I had had in a week or so. She saw this and decided to reassign tables and work as a server as well as bartender. She of course took my table and said it was now hers, even though I had been serving them for about an hour and they were almost done with their meal. This wasn't the first time, but it was the last straw for me. I went up to the table, explained the situation, and instead of just transferring the table, I cashed them out, which they were happy to do. So I collected the cash tip, told the bartender frick you, I quit, and walked out with the tip from the table and never talked to anyone at that bar again. I found a better job the next day. I was working at a company for only a few months when things started to get bad. I had direct deposit set up and I was away on vacation when payday came around. My paycheck didn't drop in my bank account. Okay, interesting. I texted a coworker and the boss said that the new assistant forgot to approve it. This happened for the next 3 pay periods. I had to go to my boss every payday to try and get her to cut my check. Some days she would leave early and tell us she totally forgot. That following Monday, she comes in and is showing off a new car she bought over the weekend. Right there I told her I will not be coming back into work and I would like my final pay. I didn't say frick this, I quit, but I sure as heck should have. No way was I even going to give her the decency of 2 weeks notice, either. Who the heck buys a new car when you're struggling to pay your employees? Still gets me mad. My husband was working for a company like that. Boss shows up with a brand new truck and proceeds to tell everyone he doesn't know if he can make payroll the following Friday. I asked months in advance for time off during a Friday. I was approved. The fateful Friday came around and everybody I worked with, 4 of us, were also approved for time off. We all had the same event to attend. The manager calls me the night before and tells me that I need to come in. I told him I had already made the plans and that I was approved months ago with emails to show for it. He responded by telling me if I didn't show I'd be fired. I just didn't go. Frick you, Jason. Same thing basically happened to me. Was told I'd get time off the weekend before 4th of July. Manager makes a last minute schedule change the day of and tells me it's mandatory to come in. After arguing about how I'd told them 2 months ahead of time, I told her I wouldn't come in ever again and to bite me then I hung up the phone. HR dude calls on Friday at 6 p.m. Hey, I'm really sorry. The insurance company won't cover you until you're an employee for 60 days. Me. That's a shame. Since you promised that you'd cover me and children right away, that you'd arrange the 60 days going to not apply to me, and I told you that was a condition for me accepting this job. Also, my son's surgery is literally on Monday, in 2 days, and he was shocked that I quit the next week. Just totally livid that I gave a week's notice. You know this means you'll never work here again, yeah, or hey, that's the freaking point. For the second year in a row the big meeting with the CEO went, and we hit 150% of our targets this year. No pay raises for anyone. I was hired for a college to run their office where students got hands-on work in the field. When I discovered that they were ripping off students' hours, I started providing students copies of their hours and telling them to keep a notebook with the copies for their records. See, the students were on a contract that if they didn't graduate by the date estimated for completion, students were required to pay $200 every additional week it took to complete among suspensions, which in turn went against contract graduation date. Full stop. They also asked me to falsify a report of students' absences to suspend them even though I had documented proof the student was in class. I decided to leave that job, but not before telling students to report them to the state board and providing statements for the lawyer who the students gathered to represent their case. I got hired in a custom fabrication shop as one of their 2 welders. Boss promises to have me learn a bit of everything: machining, water jet, design, but barely even had me do any welding. On top of being a massive C to everyone. Talked crap about us to customers while we were working right next to him. Got hired at a different company Thursday evening. Other welder quit Friday morning. I quit Friday at lunch. Felt real good leaving them up crap creek. I used to work as some kind of aid worker rescuer in events with large gathering of people, concerts, festivals, etc. The boss owner always put her head down for the clients and allowed them to exploit us. One of the regular clients was the event manager of a popular stadium. They would ask us to be in the stadium 3 hours prior the event to clean, yup, and stay afterwards to clean, yup. The manager wasn't paying more money for it, but the boss didn't want to lose the client, so we just have to do it. So, there would be events with that took 16 hours to complete, with a menial pay, no food or beverage, and with the client expecting us to do more work for free. Note, I never did that, and always encouraged my partners to leave. It wasn't our job to clean. But the moment that made me say frick this crap was when the boss called me saying that the client emailed her with a complaint about me. I thought it would be about me and my team always leaving after the job was done and not staying for cleaning. But no, they told me that they always see you chatting with your partner, and with a smile. They don't want the attendants to see their workers distracted and all laughing. They want to show that only professionals work with them. So they are asking that you turn down and notch your positive attitude and keep a poker face all the time. I've worked in retail part-time since I was 16. In my first job they started introducing a punishment system for when team members didn't make their target. Thankfully it never happened to me, but one day a manager posted on our staff Facebook page a video of them throwing a bucket of water over an employee who didn't make his target, purely for everyone else to laugh at. This didn't happen with any of the other punishments. He had worked there 10 years. He was a stockroom member, so wouldn't even be on the shop floor to make the targets set for him, as all targets for every member were sales based, even if you weren't a sales member, because if it was busy there was a chance you would have to go on the shop floor and help. He had taken off his shoes and placed them to the side so they didn't get wet. He did this because he had to get 2 buses to run from work every day. That was my official frick this moment and quit after that. I used to work nights as a cashier at a deli convenience store. Pretty chill job. The manager who worked during the day quit, so my boss asked me to switch and handle manager's responsibilities. I said sure, with a pay raise. He assured me it would only be for a week. So I said fine, I'll do you the favor. So now, I would work 6 AM to 4 PM during the week and 6 AM to 11:30 PM during the weekends. The new times also involved a lot more work. I would literally be running the entire store myself, including orders, deliveries, inventory, a bunch of other things that I was not getting paid to do. Should also note that my boss didn't even know how to work the register, let alone anything else that needed to be done. Well, that week turned into a month. I went back into his office, which was a supply closet with a computer in it, to discuss a pay raise, and he asked to take me out to dinner to discuss it. I said no. Told him he had another week to find someone. Next week goes by and it's a Friday. I go up to him and ask him for either a raise or some sort of bonus for all that I've done. He asks about dinner again and I say no. He then says no to the raise or bonus. So I told him I quit. He can show up tomorrow and Sunday 6 AM to 11:30 PM because I won't be there. I'm telling this to the man who doesn't know how to open the register. I walk away and go back to the register. He comes up to me 10 minutes later, opens his wallet, and pulls out a $100 bill and gives it to me as my bonus. I take it, put it in my purse and say thank you. I'm still quitting though. The look on his face was amazing. An hour later, I pay myself for the week and left. I was the IT department for a small company. A few times I would go to the owners' places and work on their computers there, set up VPNs back to the office, etc. Didn't take long for that to morph into come over tonight. My teenage daughter has an essay due and the printer isn't working and little Johnny got his computer loaded with viruses again. Come fix it. I didn't get paid extra for the house calls. When I finally said frick it I quit, they wouldn't accept my resignation, as though they had a choice, so I wrote a bridge burning letter detailing why I was leaving. House calls was the only point in the letter that they took issue with. Company promised a retreat in Banff because we hit our sales targets. 2 weeks before the trip, they say it's been cancelled, with no plans to pay us out for the pooled bonus that would have went towards that trip. On the weekend of the trip, a manager posts a photo of her and other managers in Banff. But oh no, it wasn't work related. They said it was for a manager's birthday, even though one of the managers that went absolutely hates the one who was allegedly celebrating the birthday. Quit shortly after. Ooh boy, strap in. I used to work at IHOP as a server. Our manager was wildly incompetent. She would leave with the manager card, which was the only way to correct an order, refund something, etc. She was spiteful and stupid, a deadly combination. So I was poor, and had a raggedy pair of the non-slip shoes you're supposed to wear in food service. I also had a pair of Doc Marten work shoes that were slip oil electric proof, same color and all. She made a big stink about me not wearing the correct shoes. I explained they were on their last leg, and that even though the docs were technically not regulation, they fit the criteria. They even said it on the sole. So she threatens to fire me over these freaking shoes and I cave and wear the crappy shoes to work. Saturday night, packed to the gills, not a seat in the house. Halfway into my nightmare understaffed shift, as I'm carrying an appetizer sampler and a tray of drinks to a table, the sole rips from the upper and I trip and spill the whole freaking sampler on the table. Ranch, honey mustard, marinara, 4 Dr. Peppers, all over me and a couple, face and all. I freak out and apologize, explain I'll comp the food and then go to find the manager. Guess who went home? With that almighty card you need to void checks or discount them. I also had about 5 other tables suffering who saw all this happen. I call her, she's at home, lives 15 minutes away. I told her not to bother, asked her how she could be so freaking stupid to go home with the card for the 10,000th time, screamed about the dang shoes etc, and told her to go frick herself. Took my tips out of the cash I had, told all my customers their meals were on the house, and stripped down to my underwear right there in the parking lot. Walked to my car and changed my clothes. Never looked back. When I was 17, my boss asked if I had any extra Vicodin left over from my on-site work injury, and if he could have it. The owners of that Subway were fed up on opiates. I left not long after. I got skipped on a guaranteed bonus. Company performance, not mine. Even though I fell well within the requirements. It wasn't a ton of money but I felt slighted. They felt like they owned me. Little did they know my clients had been scouting me as an employee. I was a contractor, so I already had jobs ready for me at better pay. I quit and took the job with my client, effectively killing the contract renewal with my old company. My boss pleaded with me to stay and offered even a higher salary. I told me if I was worth more than the bonus before I quit. How come you didn't offer it to me then? I'm quitting on principle, not for the money. This job offer existed before your slight. They still get excited when I call for a referral thinking I'm coming back. Nope, sorry. Was a cell phone tower climber. Winds were pretty high, right on the edge of where we should have called the day off. Foreman was a drunk whose wife thought he was sober. He would close the bar down every night we were on the road, as did most of the climbers. A few hours and the winds keep getting gustier. Foreman wants to finish the job. By the end I remember just trying to get the cable stable on the tower, leaning off as far as I could to bring it back in and then pinning it to the steel while my co-worker attached it to the tower. Mind you, this is heavy cable, a bit more than a pound per foot up a 300-foot tower. Those things get moving. If it falls and gets damaged it is expensive, and if it hits someone they're going to the air. I kept my calm through the day, but it wasn't the first day of overlooking as many safety precautions as possible. People free climbing, dropping tools from height, etc. Obnoxiously the pay wasn't even good. The cell phone companies contract out to construction management firms who contract to smaller fly-by-night crews. There is no money at the bottom of that crappy ladder. After being refused for the 4th time after being promised a raise because of being assigned parts of the jobs of 5 higher paid people who had been let go, I said F this, I retire. But first I took off 2 months to have an elective surgery under their health insurance. I was first promised the raises of Thanksgiving, then the 1st of December, then Christmas, and finally the end of January to give management enough time to do the paperwork. The 1st of February they told me that, unfortunately, I would not be getting the raise. I once worked as an air quality monitor. We would primarily get involved with sewage contractors. One day, we're on a job and there's these huge cylindrical digestion tanks with tons and tons of human crap inside of them. They were each around 30 feet tall. One of the contractors had to perform work on the roof of one of these tanks. I was to be harnessed and standing beside the guy monitoring for any vox. There were concerns that the roof would collapse, and even though I was harnessed, I would literally fall into a huge pile of bubbling crap. I said frick this, I quit. I once spent 6 hours fixing an error in my code that stemmed from me misplacing a space. That was when I realized that 1, I hated this job, and 2, I am seriously not cut out for this if I could waste 6 hours on this kind of error on my part. I quit a week later after I got another offer. I worked in an outgoing call center for 1 day and 1 hour. It was ringing up small business owners trying to get them to do a survey. I spent several hours being told, justified, to frick off. If you weren't dialing a new number as soon as you'd ended a call, the management were on your back. In our opening script, we told them the survey was 10-15 minutes. The one time I got someone to do it, he was asking how long was left at about 20-25 minutes. It was freaking miserable. The second day, I got in, spent an hour being told to frick off, justified, then just stood up and walked out. I'd rather eat 7p packets of noodles than do that crap. Redditors who rage quit a job without thinking. What was the last straw? Director of a preschool I worked at pulled me into her office and literally foaming at the mouth told me I had no business going to my higher up to report suspected child abuse. Walked out, never looked back. If I'm not mistaken, the preschool is now shut down. Jimmy John's manager wants us running to our cars. Normally I'm cool with that, but it's a busy parking lot and was raining. Tons of cars going 20 miles per hour in between me and my car. So I am carefully walking to not slip or get run over since it was hard to see in rain. Strangely enough, I'm not risking being run over for 5 per hour. The manager just starts ripping into me and yelling at me in front of the staff for not running in the parking lot. Sadly, he didn't realize I wasn't a college kid he could abuse and I snapped back at him. He ended up going into the back because he was about to cry and I let my boss know I won't be coming in anymore and he'll need to cover the 4 days where I was the only driver for 5 hours. Capital I. Worked at a rental car agency for about 9 months. Dealt with nasty customers 24/7 who would demean me, cuss me out, or sob. It was exhausting. One day, a customer gets upset we don't have a specific make model of SUV for him, even though size is the only promised vehicle spec for a reservation, and he spits on me, right in my face. My manager escorted him out of the building but didn't say a word to me, clocked out and never looked back. I think I've talked about this before, but I worked in a horrible toxic pain clinic and all the nurses would fight over the doctor, who was an butthole and gross. He only hired women, so every new girl was shunned and treated terribly, like open hostility. It was a nightmare. I quit the day I was shoved away from a keyboard and called a freaking retard when the nurse realized I hadn't turned the caps lock off before she shoved me. I walked out on my lunch, blocked their number and never looked back. Way to keep your cool. I would be hard pressed not to allow my emotions get the better of me. My boss blew out metal dust with pressure air while I was working inside the trunk, grinding off the welds from the car trunk repair. I had full face mask at the time, but inside trunk the air kinda circulated and metal dust shot up to my eyes. I thought I was going blind at the time. When I came back from hospital after getting the metals out, boss went around saying he blew that for fun and I got hurt, then started to laugh about it. That's when I said, "Frick you, I am quitting." I was swamped with a huge line of customers. A couple was problematic and needed a print job done. I stood there handling their attitude for 15 minutes while they explained what they needed. My manager, standing in the middle of the store doing nothing, said in my earpiece, "Can you help them and not just stand there?" When I was clearly assisting them. Even rare customers asked why my boss wasn't helping me as he stood in the middle of the store doing nothing. A few years ago, my youngest sister was the victim of a double murder. At the time of the crime, I was working retail for one of the big 4 cell phone companies. They actually took good care of me during this time. The court process wouldn't go on to start until about a year and a half after. Before the court date, I had left the cell phone company for the biggest cable company due to unrelated reasons. More money. We get the date. But I don't have enough PTO at the new company to cover the expected trial dates. Murder trials are very lengthy. I actually remember crying when I quit because of the amount of pressure I was under at the time. I'm not a big cry guy, so it wasn't one of my prouder moments. Jesus. I'm so sorry for your loss. I hope that justice was done for your sister. I have to have surgery tomorrow and asked my boss to cut my hours down because I've been sick and in pain. Hence the surgery. Instead she put me on 4 OT. That was the last straw. Today I'm going in to return all of the company's gear. This was fairly recent. About a few months ago, just before the summer break, I worked at a local fish and chip shop. The job itself was fine. The pay, for a 16-year-old, was quite good too. The owner, however, was unbearable. He constantly insulted me the entire time I was still picking up one of my first jobs. Because of that, I was on the fence of whether or not to get another job. On a fairly quiet night, I was listening to Pink Floyd on the radio when he suddenly turns it off, walks up to me with my phone in his hand, and says something along the lines of, "I see you using your phone again." And I break it. "The music you like, no one likes." Following that, I calmly asked if he wanted a 2 weeks notice, or if I should leave now. Later, the owner asked why I was talking about leaving in front of customers, failing to realize that he was guilty of a similar crime. After I mentioned that, he fired me on the spot. 4th consecutive day working unpaid overtime. Read 9:30 am to about 1231 am. And I was late to work the next day. Got called in for a reprimand about coming in late and I just flew off the handle. Yeah, I was salaried, but also the overtime was the result of other people in the company just consistently fricking up and passing the buck on my department to make up for their horrible time management. Manager, you know, you do good work, but you can't keep coming in late. Something's got to change. Other people don't think it's fair that you come in late. Me. You're absolutely right. I quit. God, I hated working in advertising. It sucks when they try to have it both ways with exempt employees. My wife had been working with me in a manufacturing shop and was at the time 7 months pregnant. Her job required her to stand in one position for hours at a time. Since everyone knew she was pregnant, no one had any issues with her sitting down to rest in between machine cycles. Well, one day we come in from lunch and my wife texts me her seat has disappeared and she had been called up to the office. Long story short, the supervisor I was butting heads with decided to take her chair because it isn't fair that she can sit with everyone else standing. We both walked out a few minutes later. On top of that, we had been told she could only take a few days off to be with her son when he would be born because she had used all of her FMLA for the carpal tunnel surgery she needed due to the strenuous wrist work needed for her job. Seems like a lot of crappy companies show their true colors when women are pregnant. I worked for a pharmacy for almost 2 years and we had hired a second replacement pharmacist who requested a weekend off each month. Well, when the pharmacist took his weekend they filled his shift with a floating relief pharmacist. Well, there was a particular one. We will call him Jim. Jim had been a pharmacist for 40+ years and had his own way of doing everything. Long story short, this guy didn't keep up on workplace training, new systems, anything. Instead he would sit around and work as slowly as possible, and when you asked him for anything he would pretend he didn't hear you. When the customer would come to pick up their script and it wasn't filled, he would legitimately blame the person he was working with in front of the customer, saying X didn't tell me. I told the main pharmacist if they schedule me with him again I'm done. They did. I ghosted that company. For a couple of summers during college I was a dishwasher at a local youth correctional facility. The job sucked, but the pay was really awesome. About $3 more than the minutes wage at the time, and I was able to get free, crappy cafeteria food. Most of the staff really didn't give a frick about the job and the kitchen was always gross. For example, the industrial dishwasher we had was almost never cleaned before I got there. They would clean it maybe twice a month when the supervisor would bother with an inspection. The dishwasher was like a mini car wash. You would put the plates on a conveyor belt and they would go through each section before coming out. That means all the gunk, all the leftover food on the plates that were usually not even completely cleared off, isn't really cleared off. This is doubly true with those plastic cafeteria trays because the curves on the tray, especially the back, is perfect for collecting gunk. I was completely grossed out by this. All the staff used the same stuff as the kids, so they were eating off of these filthy trays, bowls, plates, etc. So I would always clean the dishwasher before I left, which was super tedious, but completely worth it. It would even work better when taken care of properly. Fast forward to a college break. I think it was spring break, and I decide to pick up a couple of shifts to make some quick cash. It was a standard crappy day. I also had to be a server that day, which is always awful. So come around the end of the day I go to disassemble and clean out the dishwasher and immediately regretted that decision. Like I mentioned, taking apart the dishwasher was tedious and there were a lot of different compartments to it. The most important one to clean was basically where all the trash would go after wiped from the plates, which was like a gutter in the bottom of the machine. As I get closer down to this gutter I can smell that it hasn't been cleaned in a while. It smelled awful. So I take a deep breath and undo the hatch and was immediately hit with literally the worst thing I've ever smelled. I can't even really put into words how awful the smell was. I would imagine it smelled pretty similar to the cum box if it was also home to a collection of putrid dog cheese, rotting meat, and a heaping scoop of pig's crap. I immediately threw up. Didn't even have time to gag or process what the frick was happening. I freaking hightail it out of there and my coworkers ask if I'm okay, to which I answered with a resounding what the frick. When I asked when's the last time someone actually did a thorough clean of the dishwasher, one guy shrugs and says probably when you cleaned it last, which was on Thanksgiving break. I just left, didn't say anything, didn't even bother to grind my back up from my locker. I just left. My boss called the next day to ask why I wasn't in and I told him to frick off. OMG, that is insane. I worked at a small local shop when I was 17 and they said I had to work Christmas Eve, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. I said I wanted to travel to see my father in another country at Christmas as we'd been separated for years and were going to spend our first Christmas together in about 10 years. I quit the job because family is more important than some crappy job, especially at that age. It turned out that Christmas was the last time I saw my dad as he died a few months later. That's really crappy. I get in a shop that's open on holidays that someone has to bite the bullet, but it shouldn't be the same person every holiday, especially in a string of holidays like that. Look, if I can't have Xmas with my family, then you had better give me New Year's. I was working my first serving job at a crappy Italian restaurant, and it was like 3 days before Christmas, so every single night we had a full house with at least one huge holiday party. I was working the regular tables and fricked up on one dish and forgot to note that the pasta was supposed to be gluten-free. The owner of the restaurant was a total butthole but would usually only yell one and be done. I accepted my first round of yelling in stony silence and continue working. However, every time I went into the kitchen, he'd start right up again. I had two of the sweetest old couples come in that night, and both of them told me I was the best waitress they'd ever had. And then I'd go back to the kitchen and be told that I should just be a permanent host if I can't write food orders down correctly. As my last table left and I said goodbye to them, I just knew they were the last table I would ever have at that restaurant. I did my checkout and went up to the front of house manager and said I was giving him my 2 weeks. He told me, "You can't quit in the middle of the holidays." I then went to the back of house manager, asked him to come to the posted schedule with me. I counted out 2 weeks of shifts for me, and then drew a line all the way through the other shifts and said, "I'm done after that date." I then went to go roll silverware and other closing duties, and the owner walks up to me and says, "Take your crap and get out. TLDR. I got fired for quitting. OP, I'm done after that date. Art's crappy ex-manager. No you." For me it was a literal straw. My first job was the snack stand at the local movie theater. The manager was an old guy who looked down on everyone, especially if they were younger and female. So after a few months of dealing with this jerk, one night it's really slow and I've cleaned the entire area and have nothing to do. He walks by and dumps every straw on the floor and tells me to pick them up. I said F you and walked out. Worked at a restaurant that was completely out of control, like providing alcohol to minors, letting employees blow coke in the office bathrooms, servers drinking excessively on the job, etc. When they started stealing money from my paycheck, I confronted my boss and they threatened to fire me. I stuck around for a while because the tips were really good, but then I had to call in sick for the first time ever after 4 years. My boss drove to my house to see if I was home and attempted to call me out for lying. I explained to her we had lost power at my house because of a blizzard and it was too cold to stay in a house without heat. So yeah, I stayed at a friend's house. I also told her I would not be coming back to work. She then told everyone she fired me and I begged to stay and all that. I got accused of stealing from the cash register at a bakery when in reality I was just paying for my food. Every co-worker told me that I could take whatever I wanted, and no one would ever notice, but I felt bad about doing that. Then they caught me taking my change from the register, and called me into the back room where they interrogated me for like an hour, and then didn't even apologize once they figured out the truth. I quit a couple hours later, but not before helping myself to everything in the store I ever wanted to try. Interned at a local wedding magazine during college. Small office of 3 interns who put the mag together, with an editor who will always be the most incompetent person I've ever worked with. And I've worked in food. Anyway, after months of petty bulls, my car broke down over Thanksgiving. I called the editor, letting her know just in case I was ever late showing up, as I planned to take the bus bum rides. Her response: "Oh, your car broke down? You are no longer needed as an intern." Click. B. You did not just hang up on me. I was mad, but I took that call as a blessing in disguise and decided to forget about it. We weren't getting paid as interns, so who cares? 2 months later, a Saturday, I'm relaxing at home when I get a call. Guess who? Hey OP. Listen, I'm sorry about that call during Thanksgiving. My phone dropped it. We're trying to get this month's edition printed, and I can't keep up with all the mail, ads and phone calls. It's crazy here, and the other girls quit. Can you believe that? When will you be back in the office? Readers, it's been 4 years since that Saturday, but even now I can still feel that incredible sense of petty joy. You said I was no longer needed as an intern 2 months ago. I have already accepted a new position elsewhere. My boss doesn't call me on weekends and actually pays me. Lose my number. Click. I ran the books department of a store and worked there for 3 years. I caught the flu really bad one year, like I didn't exist for a full 3 weeks. I couldn't eat or move. I just slept endlessly day in and out. At one point my mom came over to check on me and banged on all my windows, including the one directly above my head, but she couldn't wake me. I was that level of sick. I was in touch with my job every few days and sat through the waiting room with a 104F fever to get them medical notes to excuse my absences, etc. They knew how sick I was, so when I inevitably returned, I was slow moving and not doing so hot yet, hardly eating and all that, trying to get back to healthy. I came back to my department absolutely wrecked and the managers laughed, telling me they didn't know how to work in my section, so they just left it untouched. For the entire time I was out incredibly sick, they had me pick up the piles and piles of heavy books just dumped all over the floors when I could barely stand still. I quit that day. I worked with a guy called Andrew at McDonald's and he had worked there 5+ years before quitting. One day he got into an argument with a manager over whether they should clean the ice cream machine so we could serve ice cream or leave it off and say it's broke and leave it until overnights could do it. Argument snowballed and eventually the manager yelled, "I'm a manager. Do what I say. You're too dumb to even be a crew trainer," which wasn't true. He was in university and was a month away from graduation. This manager was hired about 7 months prior, it being McDonald's. We didn't have many good days, but that day was Andrew's last straw. He calmly walked to the back to where we left our stock, then went to the bathroom. Moments later, Andrew walked out butt naked wearing nothing but his no-slip shoes and his car keys in his hand, with his other hand holding a kid-sized cup over his genitals. He flipped her off and walked out the front door and drove home. I was impressed he stood up for himself, but man, come on. At least use a medium cup. Give us the sense of illusion. I was the third developer to hire on at a startup. My boss was a new programmer, but was the IT director by virtue of being an early hire. Pretty quickly he started claiming credit for my work. The final straw was when he scheduled a company-wide meeting to demo his secret project. He accidentally overlapped the meeting time with weekly code reviews and proceeded to run Gish Gallop on me in front of the whole company. He followed with a demo of his new browser cache module. I was pretty steamed at that point and said he just wasted 3 months writing something already built into the browser. I quit when he wrote me up for insubordination 10 minutes later. Been dealing with a pretty terrible boss for the last few years. Just signed an offer letter from a competing firm, which means the next time he asks me to stay late and not get paid for work that I do will be met with my letter of resignation. My guess is I will be handing it to him in the next 24 hours. Update 1. Boz will be leaving on vacation for the next 3 weeks, which means 2 things. 1. I will be doing all of his work for the next 3 weeks, which is what I already do, so it's not actually an issue. 2. I will be delivering my 2 weeks notice by tomorrow at the latest. Update 2. Per everyone's request, I will post an update tomorrow right here. Although I believe I have been mistreated and I have clearly been underpaid in my position, I am actively choosing not to be petty in my resignation. But trust me, I've fantasized about all the ways I could screw this company over. The letter of resignation is typed, signed, and printed to company letterhead in my desk. Update 3. I said I was not going to be petty, but I broke the shredder on accident. I am debating on whether or not I say anything. Update 4. Boz came in late, per usual, and immediately started telling me about the rough day he had. I asked to speak with him in the conference room and informed him I will be moving on. He was clearly surprised and wasn't able to construct much of a response. The only thing he mentioned was how difficult this makes his job because there are a few things that only I know how to do. There was no counteroffer from him or an offer to increase my salary. Not surprised. I am giving him the professional courtesy of interviewing a replacement. He seemed pretty shocked, and it's pretty clear that he is worried about not having someone do the essential duties that I perform, since I am the only one in the whole firm that knows how to do them. Update 5. This will probably be the last and final update, but I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words of encouragement and luck. After turning in my final notice, I immediately felt more relaxed and much less stressed. My hope is I can recharge over the next few weeks and be able to go into my new job rested, focused, and excited to succeed. It certainly feels good to be in your last few weeks of a terrible job. Worked at a small law firm as a contractor, probably to prevent the firm from paying taxes, offering benefits, paying unemployment, etc. Got a new case assigned to me on my own one afternoon. The next day, the boss has a staff meeting. He proceeds to ask me every detail about my new case, like various deadlines and details. I hadn't gotten much into that stuff yet due to other cases taking priority, so I say some form of I don't know offhand or I'll have to look that up. The boss laughs at me and berates me in front of the whole team. The next workday, I wasn't in for the morning due to a fortunate gas leak in my car. Boss demands that I take an Uber into the office and provide documenting for the car work. Instead, I talk to a family friend that practices employment law. I would almost certainly be legally considered an employee, not a contractor, so I would get unemployment as long as I didn't quit, but got fired. I sent the boss an email saying since I'm a contractor, I'd like to work from home. I'll send you a bill for my time at $XX per hour. Boss replied, saying no, you're no longer needed. Filed with unemployment. They initially denied my claim. I appealed and provided all documentation I had for the whole occurrence. The investigator found that I had been an employee and was fired. My claim denial was overturned, and the boss paid my unemployment until I got myself a much better job. When I was in high school, I worked as a flower shop clown, standing at the side of the road, holding a 15-pound sign, waving at traffic, to entice them to buy flowers. My second weekend, 4 bros in a red Chevette kept driving by every 10 minutes or so, honking and flipping me off. Fine, whatever. They disappeared for about 45 minutes. They came back and hucked a Wendy's Frosty at me. Thankfully it missed. They went around the block and came at me again. I threw the sign frisbee style at their car. It smashed the passenger door and broke the window. The driver dynamited the brakes and came to a screeching halt, and the 4 Bridogs got out, obviously wanting to fight me. Keep in mind, I'm wearing a clown suit. They're chasing me across the parking lot of the mall, and I run past the 2 security idiots at the entrance. I run inside and into the flower shop and into the back. I get changed, take my wig off, tell the manager I quit, and I left. As I was walking out the door, they were still screaming at the security guards and the cops had showed up. I got a call that afternoon saying that my paycheck was being held up because of the damage to the Chevette, and I was banned from the mall. No regrets. My first job working at McDonald's, I started at 15. 1/2. Not sure what the laws are now, but they weren't allowed to have me work full time and I couldn't work past I think like 7 PM. When I turned 16 they were supposed to automatically give me a raise, in the corporate policy at the time. That didn't happen. When I approached management about it about 2 weeks later they apologized and said they would work on putting the paperwork in immediately. It never happened, because new management came in. So I once again asked the new management for a raise, as I was previously promised a raise 2 times. They said they would work on it. Once again never happened. Saw BK was having open interviews on my way home, sat down, interviewed, got the job and told them I could start in 2 days. I was still scheduled to work the next day at McDonald's. Came in, did my job and just started telling all my co-workers I'm done and not coming back. Management easily heard, sat me down, offered to give me a $1.50 an hour raise. I told them my new job was still going to be paying me $1 an hour over that, then got changed out of my clothes and left. The best decision, because within a year I was promoted to assistant manager and got another $2 per hour pay raise. Still ended up quitting a year after that due to college. Worked at McDonald's. Manager kept switching employees around but left the tills. End of the day my till was $20 short and there were 3 or 4 different employees who had used that till. She said it was coming out of my paycheck and I told her that I quit. She said I could quit at the end of the week BC she didn't have anyone to cover me. To which I replied, no, I'm quitting right now. In fact it's already happened, and walked out. I joined the army a couple of weeks later. I could deal with the domestic bulls the owners brought in every day, but when they wanted me to put spoiled milk in the customer's coffee because that's all we have right now, I had to leave. Through most of college I worked for a family that owned a few small restaurants. By the time I graduated I was pretty much managing them. Had no interest in the restaurant business, but they didn't really have someone to fill the role I was doing, and they begged me to stick around while they got up to speed on what I did, transition duties, etc. They were good people, always treated me great, and the dough wasn't bad, so I said no problem. The thing was, I had also started my real job at that point, so I'm busting butt over there trying to get started on my career, and then would leave there, have to swing by a pizzeria or two and straighten out whatever nonsense they were up to that day, interview someone, whatever. Again, I wasn't miserable or anything, but I was just kind of done with it. So one Saturday morning, after a long week, and then a long Friday night, I'm going in to open the store to receive some stuff, because the guy in charge of it had some BS reason as to why he couldn't make it in. I'm hungover, grumpy as crap, and really just want to go back to bed or do pretty much anything other than waiting for a dude with produce to show up. I'm barely out of my car, and a freaking goose comes out of nowhere and, well, it's not the right word, but molests me, comes to mind. After fending it off, I go in, call up the father of the family, who was like family to me, and was Anthony. Man, I can't do this anymore. I swear had that goose not attacked me, I'd probably still be working part-time there to this day, 20 years later, even though I have a great career and family and whatnot. Also, that goose would have had a much longer life, because Anthony brained it with a shovel in a fit of rage later that day. The goose tried to goose you and had its goose cooked. I worked at a pet store for 8 years, and I watched the animal care standards deteriorate with each new wave of management. I came in one morning and found 2 chameleons drowned in their habitat, and when I told the manager that it was simply due to negligence, he literally said, "We will just order extra next time." Beforehand, I had spent countless hours trying to train the new employees on the appropriate way to do things, and I had approached the manager with suggestions for improvement. It became abundantly clear that he just didn't give a frick. The lack of accountability and the general disregard for animal life was maddening. And let me be clear, I am not one of those people that are absolutely nuts about animals. I just feel like if it is your one freaking job to keep them alive, then that is what should happen. Redditors who upped and left their corporate city job for something more fulfilling. What did you end up doing, and are you happier? TLDR. I quit my steady office job so I could work full-time on writing. You know, that thing they tell aspiring writers to never ever do. Slightly longer version. After a long period of stress-related health problems, I finally had the grandaddy of all panic attacks last September. I called my boss and put in my 2 minutes notice. I walked away from the world of high-tech, hotel points and expense accounts, burning every bridge I had in the process so that I could work full-time on finishing my book. I had nothing more than 2/3 of a manuscript and no prospective publishers lined up. For some unknown reason, my wife did not leave me. After a sufficient cooling off period, I got to work on it. Used the last of my cash to hire a professional editor, illustrator and formatter. Luckily, the job I walked away from allowed me to spend a lot of time with professional advertisers, so I learned a thing or two about marketing along the way. I made the difficult and risky decision to self-publish. Once I released my book, I maxed out my credit card so I could properly self-promote. I skipped Christmas last year because I was selling my possessions on eBay and Craigslist so I could eat. Somehow my wife still didn't leave me. This month, I paid all of my bills with royalty earnings. Just barely, but I freaking did it. Sure, I used to have steak and craft beer 2 or 3 times a week, and I sported a pretty impressive cufflink collection there for a while. And now I eat microwave pizza and I'm still wearing the same shorts from yesterday. But I haven't had seen my therapist in a year, and for some strange reason my wife is still here. It was a massive trade-off. Super risky and dumb. But I'm happier than I've ever been. Do not recommend. I'm happier than I've ever been. Do not recommend. Laughed at this one. I understand what you're getting at though. I worked a Monday to Friday sales job, 9/5 weekends off, and it just didn't cut it for me. I felt that there was more for me out there and decided to apply as a flight attendant for a major commercial airline company in my country. One of my top goals was to travel and explore the world. Best thing that has ever happened to me. I had to move to the other side of the country for my job, but the rewards are priceless. Anytime you place yourself out of your comfort zone, this is when you truly start to live and experience life for what it is. If you're having thoughts about leaving your corporate job, I suggest you just do it. Chances are you're probably not fully content if you're thinking your options. I left years of corporate customer service jobs to work with animals at PetSmart. My pay cut was huge, but my happiness was tenfold. So rewarding. You can't have a bad day if you get kisses from puppies and kittens. I've had the opposite experience. Actually, I worked in the public sector for a number of years on a number of projects I felt very passionate about. Due to local and state politics, many of those projects never saw the light of day. Note, I'm a researcher, so these were research projects with findings that were never published. About a year ago, I received an offer to move to the private industry and do similar work. I jumped at the chance and have never looked back. Now, my work gets published regularly. My pay increased by about 45%. The stereotypes about public sector pay being bad are not exaggerated, at least in my case, and my work is challenging and rewarding. I went from working 50 hours a week for fairly modest salary to working 45 hours and a good salary. The fuzzy feel-good attitude about working for the public sector only goes so far when I'm barely making rent and neglecting my savings. Now I'll live comfortably, but the biggest thing for me is that my work is getting out there to the world. As a researcher, the most rewarding thing I can hope for is getting published. Now I have a mechanism for that happening pretty often. I wouldn't trade anything for this opportunity. Worked at a crappy sales job out of college. Lasted 6 months before I realized I never wanted to wear slacks or show up to an office where people spent 6-8 hours bitching about customers or talking about yesterday's Zumba class again. Sold my car and what little I owned and moved to China. Now work at a craft brewery. Don't make much money, but everyone I work with is a total homie. Learning about cool stuff, and I get to continue to study Chinese. It's freaking awesome. The beer is good, the people are cool, and I wear sandals to work. Don't know how long I will work here, but really happy to be learning every day, and I will always be thankful to the people I work with for giving me the chance to do something fun. Did 18 years of IT support, and changed to tour guide. This has easily been the happiest 12 years in my life. Leaving IT support was the best decision I ever made. I only spent 5 years in that dead end though. But now I'm happier than ever working as an arborist climbing trees all day. Left a job in projects, banking, to become a chippy builder in the country. Completed a pre-apprenticeship but then found the local economy turned and found it difficult finding someone willing to take an immature age apprentice. Ended up working a horrible factory job for almost 2 years, and recently landed a work from home customer support job for a friend's business. I'm not doing what I planned, although I now have the confidence to attempt own a building in future, and money is tight, but country life suits me and the family much better. No crowds, no traffic, people are more down to earth, the air is fresher and the night sky amazing. Wouldn't give it up for the world. Land spreading so far and wide. Keep Manhattan. Just give me that countryside. Pay off your debt, live within your means, and gain control of your life. Do whatever it takes to get to a point where you have a paid off car, home, and no debt. Then you can start thinking about living a fulfilling life. I used a 60-hour-a-week job for a few years to do all that, and then I cut and ran just as soon as I had gained control of my finances and no longer owed anything to anyone. Then came the flexibility to find something more fitting and less stressful. I had a 6-figure corporate job and worked weekends and 16-hour days. I remember my daughter calling me to ask if I was coming home. I'd drive her to school and see her in bed at night. Now I'm getting a biology degree and doing research. Saturday I was in waders in a fast-moving river, collecting fish samples with 4 people from our lab, and loving every minute of it. I drive a car without hubcaps and worry about paying bills, and have loan debt, but I'm happy. Sounds like your daughter might still be calling you to come home. Worked in cushy Silicon Valley job but left to work on my own business. Very happy now. Make more money and have more time and autonomy. Downside is my healthcare coverage is terrible, so I never go to the doctor. I'm in the process of doing that right now. I already gave my notice and my last day is the 27th. I've been working a corporate office job and I hate it so much. I've been suffering extremely severe depression and anxiety. I didn't want to quit without having another job lined up, but it got to the point where I just decided I couldn't stand it anymore. My plan is to focus on creative endeavors and see if I can make a career out of writing and photography. Luckily I have some money saved and I'm being realistic about it. I'm gonna still continue to look for another day job and my emergency plan is to drive Uber if I run out of money. Also I have no kids and I'm still pretty young, so I realized if I wanna do this, the time to do it is now. Seriously though, follow your dreams and even if it doesn't work out you'll probably be happier that you at least tried. I regret wasting the majority of my 20s in a job I hated and I've decided I won't make that mistake again. I worked for a law firm and moved to a rural area to be closer to my parents. My mother has lupus and I wanted to be closer to her to help them out around the house and financially when I could afford it. Just found out 2 days ago that my father has been diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis. Don't look it up. The prognosis isn't usually good. It's the same disease that killed my uncle and my grandmother. I left a lot of money behind to switch jobs and enjoyed the slower pace of working out here, but I had always had the did I make the right choice question in the back of my mind. Now that I know just how little time I might have with my father left, I absolutely am happy I made the move. I've been able to see him more in the last 2 years than I had the previous 7. I plan on taking every chance I can to spend as much time with him as possible moving forward. Hopefully I get the chance to take him down to Toronto for a few more Leafs games over the next couple years. TLDR. Left a more cushy job to move out to the country and be closer to my parents. Don't regret a thing. Hey, just wanted to say I'm sorry about your parents' health. You sold like a wonderful son-daughter, and this internet stranger wishes you all the best. I started in IT doing a Windows rollout project as a contractor for a recruitment agency for a big IT corporate. He quickly became team leader for a few more sites on the project, and within a few months the company offered me a job in IT support. The company I worked for had tuition agreements with big players like HP, where I would be able to get qualifications through the company for free, and my manager saw a good future for me in the company. However, I just felt that the corporate culture was draining my spirit. Life became a matter of survive the week so that you can have a drink with your friends over the weekend, which is how many busy professionals live. The pay was good, especially considering that I started at the bottom and would quickly work my way up. But I just hated the corporate culture, the commute, the lack of time, always being tired. Now I do network cabling and related DIY stuff for small businesses. It's extremely fulfilling. I go to site, I install the cables in the 2-8 hours that it takes, and then I go home. No sitting around waiting for work, no having to look busy for the clients. Just do the work, finish the work on the same day that you start, and go home without any lingering stress from any ongoing calls. I earn less overall, but I work fewer hours and can choose when I want to go to site. It's particularly nice for me when I can arrange to do the work overnight, since I love to sleep in and I enjoy working when it's quiet. I'm much happier now, and my finances aren't bad either. With reduced income, you just need to reduce your expenditure. Slightly smaller car, slightly cheaper food, slightly older cell phone. It's this exact question that really worries me. As a finance major, student, I want to be happy, but I'm scared I won't be with a corporate job. So these responses have been a great piece of insight. Worked 16 years in IT. From owning an ISP to being a senior storage and firmware admin at a large company. Resigned 5 years ago. Did some demolition, gardening, and construction, and I'm now starting a small business in an unrelated industry. I miss the money, working with really awesome people, and amazingly cool technology. I don't miss the stress, anxiety, and workload one bit. I'm also a lot healthier, down almost 40 pounds, from not sitting on my butt for 9 hours a day in front of 3 monitors. So that's an added bonus. The startup is slow, but initial feedback has been positive and it's so flexible that I can book a few days or a week off whenever I want. Oh, and it's only for 5 or 6 months of the year. So, I'll find some other hobbies and turn them into a small business this winter. Or, finish that house reno I started 7 years ago. Overall, to answer the question, yes, I am happier. I ran away to sea for 3 years sailing tall ships. It gives a good perspective on what is and isn't important. Everyone should do it. Was teaching scuba diving overseas for a few years. Great lifestyle, but eventually you want more money in the bank at the end of the year than the beginning of the year. So now I'm back to the cubicle life. This is depressing. I haven't upped and left, but I have changed the terms. I no longer have a middle management, permanent job, with a team and an alleged career path. I now do project-based contracts, which means I do get very involved in work, but without the corporate politics and other toxic, time-sapping stuff. But when the project ends, I take off for a few months. The money is better and your job is about as secure as anyone who has a permanent job. The one thing I do need to remember is vacation sick pay is part of my daily rate, and if a company lays off staff I don't get a slice of any redundancy or severance. It's great to turn up to work, do the very best work I can, and leave it at the door at home time. Not me, but football, soccer. Manager Mark Warburton gave up his job as a forex trader in the early 2000s to go back to coaching football, which is his passion. He said that his words to his wife at the time were, "We have the money in the bank. The house is paid for. Our lifestyle won't change. I want to do this. 10 years to achieve something in the game. It's now or never." He hasn't done too badly, and funnily enough, his next job, if he continues to be as successful as he has done, will probably be for a lot more money than when he was a trader in the city. The head coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning hockey team used to be a lawyer. He moved his way up in the coaching world and is now head coach of an NHL team. I used to be a low-level IT manager at a giant tech company. I'm now CTO at a growing mobile app startup. I took a big risk, since I have a family and a mortgage, but the experience I'm gaining is incredible. After just 1 year I could probably go back to my old company as a senior director, but I won't. When this gig is done though, I think I'm going to be a park ranger. I just quit my desk job to be a professional magician. Financially, it was a terrible freaking idea and I'm barely keeping my head above water. This month I made less than rent. At current rates, I have about a year of savings before I'm dead broke. Hopefully I can turn it around before then. Still, I got out of a bull's job I hated that gave me no self-respect whatsoever. I figure that at the very worst, I'm on an extended vacation. If things don't work out, I can always go back to being a desk monkey. This answer is a slight twist. I work for the family business, a small retail service store, and chose not to go into corporate. My mom made quite a bit of money over her 30-something year career. At any given time it was double or triple my dad's. But I'll look at her and question what she gained out of it. She was never happy, always complained, doesn't have any hobbies, and now that she is retired still doesn't do anything. My dad, while for many years struggled to keep the boat afloat, was always in the green and seems to do a lot more. He has restored a few cars, looking at boats, enjoys gardening, listening to his old tunes. I originally looked toward doing something more financially secure, corporate, but my mom pushed me to help at the shop. I eventually grew into it, and since college she wants me to do something corporate. Every day I get to control what gets done, what we carry, help people on an individual basis. People know me. I have a growing reputation for some of my handwork and knowledge. Our pay will never be spectacular, but it is enough to build a decent retirement on. Not that I plan on retiring early or long enough for it to matter. The thing that I enjoy the most when I think about having a hands-on career is I have built skills that can take me most places in my field if I needed to, and have developed a wide variety of choices by working with different people if I needed to close doors and do something else. Plus we understand things happen and you take time when you need time, and we have Mondays off, which makes certain chores much easier to handle. My only warning is if you don't have some physical skills that are developed or promising, do not just run out of corporate in the hopes of making it. It is a tough world sometimes for the little guy, and if you can't show something slightly special you aren't bringing anything to the table. Just to offer a slightly contrary perspective, I'm a software developer at a small company, 200 people, in MI, and make more than enough to support myself and my so with a good chunk of fun money left over. It's not super exciting work, but it isn't meaningless or boring either. I don't dread going to work every day, and that's all I could really ask for. I'm just trying to say that corporate 9 to 5 gigs don't always suck. It depends on the company and field of work. Making big splashes in life isn't for everyone. For me, I'm not out to make waves, I'm just along for the ride. Don't feel bad because you don't want to shoot for the stars. Just shoot for not loathing going to work every day and you'll be content. I'm learning how to program develop, starting with web development just so I can get to the same place you are. With all these people saying they hate IT and want to leave, it's good to hear developing software isn't so bad. I worked as a server bartender at a tiny Mexican restaurant. We only had about 7 employees and our occupant max was maybe 30 people. It was the most fun I've ever had while getting paid. Now I work IT at the head office for a mid-sized distribution company. Despite being about as far away on the job spectrum as possible, I find both jobs equally fulfilling. One, I got to be social and enjoy a culture that I fell in love with and immediately began appropriating. I was the only non-Latino. Most of them were family and treat you as such. The other, I am in a company that treats its employees with respect, with full benefits, which means security for my family, decent pay, and I'm challenged to learn something new almost every day. It's much more difficult and more stressful, but the rewards are bigger. Thus probably isn't the type of answer OP is looking for, but to me, it's always been important to like my job. I've found that I can enjoy anything I am good at, and can be good at almost anything I'm willing to at the time into learning. There have been things I didn't enjoy putting the time into, and I moved on quickly from those things. So my job fulfillment had little do with big city versus small city pace, but with just finding something you think is worth doing, or allows you to still do the things you enjoy. In the 90s I quit everything and landing up in Cambodia during a coup. Stayed and ended up apprentice as a demeaning volunteer. It was a blast. I'm leaving the 4th of July and road tripping for 3-4 weeks. Don't know yet. I'm trying to get something set up to where I could come back and work here MF in late July or August. I've been working overnights and weekends for a year, and although corporate supervision is fairly relaxed, so I would not mind returning. If not, I'll be fine. I paid off my bills until September to prepare. I worked on puck issues and saved a lot of money for a large Fortune 500 company for 12 years. When my best friend was killed in Iraq by an IED, he always said if he was ever killed overseas, he wanted me to stop being lazy and go get my PhD. Well, the next day, I quit my job and enrolled in school. Now, I'm a vertebrate paleontologist and I dig up rare skeletons and finish them for museums and private collections. I couldn't be happier. Except for the whole losing my bro part. It really sucks not having a best friend. It was death by percocets at my last job career. I was comfortable enough to stay, but miserable enough to come to terms with the fact I did not get any fulfillment from the job. Great company, great benefits, great co-workers. My boss was a bad manager, but a nice guy. I was open about it, and they ensured a soft landing. We orchestrated unemployment benefits and quit date even though I walked voluntarily. Forward 3 years, I graduated from a graduate certificate field with transferable skills. I'm unemployed, but I have great support and a fiancé. It is stressful right now, but when I do get a job in my new field, things will be much better. It was a risk and others respected me for the courage to do it. Being honest with yourself is character building. I can't comment on whether or not I'm happier as I'm only partially there. I'm quitting my job at Corpo to become a barber. Just the mere thought of leaving my stuffy office for good to make people look good and feel good is an amazing feeling. I can't wait to get started. I'm not going to be leaving my corporate job. I'm way overpaid and underworked. Can't give that up just yet. But I am in the process of selling my house and moving into my truck. My plan is to live wherever my wheels stop and just commute back to work each day. I don't know if I'll be happier, but I suspect I will be. I don't like owning a home. I don't want to burn money on rent and I need a very small footprint to be happy. I worked for a big company for 5 years doing IT. Now I do the same job, but for a friend in a much smaller company. I am not going back if I can in any way help it. Working with people you actually like makes everything so much better. Not me, but a guy on my team. He worked in finance in the city, then gave it up, went back to school, and started working at my brewery. I'm his boss, and he is honestly a great worker and appears to be happier. I enjoy working with my hands and producing a product that everyone likes. I suspect he is the same. It's great having direct feedback from customers. Pay isn't great, but we do get free beer. Some other perks as well, like free concert tickets, free beer festivals. We do BBQs every Friday. I try to keep my team happy because they work very hard. You sound like an awesome boss. I'm considering doing this, should the circumstances work out. My mom recently passed away, literally under 2 weeks ago, due to hospital negligence malpractice. I'm currently an in-house attorney for a large staffing agency and making fairly decent money, the youngest on the team, aka the lowest on the totem pole, depending on how the settlement suit works out with the hospital. Considering paying off the remainder of my student loans from law school, quitting my job, and going back to school to get a nursing degree, if I can do something, anything, really, to help a family not suffer the fate that mine did, it would make everything, the entire career change. Dropping all of what I worked so hard for in law school, losing the cushy job hours, it would make all of that worth it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.